The archaeological record reveals that the earliest Maya settlements emerged in the dense tropical forests of the Payton Basin and the volcanic highlands of Guatemala around 2000 BC, marking the beginning of one of Mesoamerica's most sophisticated civilizations. These initial communities developed from small bands of hunter-gatherers who had occupied the region for millennia, gradually transitioning to sedentary agricultural societies that would lay the groundwork for the complex urban centres that would later dominate the Maya lowlands. The transformation from nomadic to settled life occurred gradually across several centuries. Archaeological excavations at sites like Cuello in northern Belize have uncovered evidence of permanent structures dating to approximately 1200 BC, including post-hole patterns indicating wooden houses with thatched roofs. These early dwellings measured roughly 4 to 6 meters in diameter and were constructed using locally available materials: hardwood posts, palm fronds, and clay daub. The presence of storage pits, grinding stones, and ceramic vessels at these sites demonstrates that the inhabitants had developed sophisticated food processing and preservation techniques essential for permanent settlement. The shift to agriculture represented a fundamental transformation in Maya society. Early farmers in the region began cultivating a triumvirate of crops that would become central to Maya civilization: maize, beans, and squash. This agricultural combination, known as the Three Sisters, provided a nutritionally complete diet and formed the basis for population growth and social complexity. Maize cultivation required extensive knowledge of selective breeding, as the wild ancestor teosinte bore little resemblance to the large-kerneled corn that Maya farmers eventually developed. Archaeological evidence from pollen cores and carbonized seeds indicates that by 1500 BC, Maya communities had successfully domesticated several varieties of maize adapted to different environmental conditions across the region. The cultivation of beans provided essential proteins and amino acids that complemented the nutritional profile of maize, while their nitrogen-fixing properties enriched the soil for subsequent plantings. Squash contributed vitamins, minerals, and edible seeds, with the mature gourds serving as water containers and storage vessels. Beyond these primary crops, early Maya farmers cultivated chili peppers, tomatoes, avocados, cacao, and cotton, creating diverse agricultural systems that supported increasingly complex societies. Agricultural intensification required sophisticated water management techniques adapted to the region's distinct wet and dry seasons. Maya farmers developed raised field systems called chinampas in swampy areas, constructing elevated planting surfaces separated by drainage canals. In areas with seasonal flooding, they built extensive networks of canals and reservoirs to capture and store rainwater during the wet season for use during the dry months. These hydraulic systems required coordinated labour and technical expertise, fostering the development of specialised knowledge and social hierarchies. The establishment of permanent agricultural settlements created conditions for population growth and craft specialisation. Villages expanded from small clusters of extended family units to communities of several hundred residents. Archaeological evidence from sites like Cibel and Alta de Sacrificios shows increasing standardization in pottery production, indicating the emergence of specialized craftspeople who devoted significant time to ceramic manufacture. These early ceramics featured distinctive decorative motifs and vessel forms that would persist throughout Maya history, including tripod bowls, cylindrical vases, and incense burners with elaborate sculptural elements. The transition to complex society accelerated around 1000 BC with the construction of the first monumental architecture in the Maya region. The site of Nacbe in northern Guatemala contains some of the earliest evidence of large-scale construction projects, including pyramidal structures reaching heights of over 45 meters. These massive stone platforms required the coordinated labor of hundreds of workers and represented a significant investment of community resources. The construction techniques employed at Nakbe involved quarrying limestone blocks, transporting them to construction sites, and assembling them using lime mortar and rubble fill cores. El Mirador, located approximately 13 kilometers southeast of Nakbe, emerged as an even more impressive early ceremonial centre around 600 BC. The site encompasses over 26 square kilometres and contains some of the largest pyramidal structures ever built by the Maya. The Ladanta complex at El Mirador rises to a total height of 72 metres from its base, making it one of the most massive architectural achievements in the ancient Americas. The construction of such monumental buildings required sophisticated engineering knowledge, including understanding of structural loads, foundation stability, and construction sequencing. These early ceremonial centres served multiple functions beyond religious activities. They operated as administrative hubs where community leaders coordinated agricultural production, trade networks, and construction projects. The presence of elaborate burials containing jade ornaments, obsidian blades, and imported ceramics indicates the emergence of distinct social classes with differential access to luxury goods and exotic materials. Elite residences at these sites featured stonemasonry construction, multiple rooms, and elevated platforms that distinguished them from the simple thatched houses of commoners. The development of long-distance trade networks facilitated the exchange of goods and ideas across Mesoamerica. Maya communities obtained obsidian from highland Guatemala and central Mexico, jade from the Motagua Valley, marine shells from both Pacific and Atlantic coasts, and cacao from tropical lowland regions. The distribution of these materials across Maya sites demonstrates the existence of complex exchange relationships that connected communities across hundreds of kilometers. Trade routes followed river systems, coastal pathways, and overland trails that would remain important throughout Maya history. Religious and cosmological concepts began to crystallize during this formative period, establishing fundamental beliefs that would persist throughout Maya civilization. Archaeological evidence from early sites reveals the veneration of natural features including caves, springs, and mountain peaks, which the Maya conceived as portals to the supernatural realm. Ceramic vessels and stone sculptures from this period depict anthropomorphic deities associated with agricultural fertility, rain, and the underworld. The feathered serpent motif, which would become central to Maya iconography, appears on early architectural sculptures and portable artifacts, indicating the antiquity of this important religious symbol. The Maya developed their distinctive writing system during the late pre-classic period, building upon earlier Mesoamerican traditions while creating unique innovations. The earliest known Maya hieroglyphic inscriptions date to approximately 300 BC and appear on stone monuments and ceramic vessels from sites across the Maya region. These early texts primarily record calendrical information and the names and titles of rulers, suggesting that writing initially served administrative and commemorative functions. The Maya script combined logographic signs representing entire words with syllabic signs representing individual sounds, creating a flexible system capable of recording the full range of Maya language. Astronomical observation formed the foundation of Maya calendrical systems and religious practices. Early Maya astronomers tracked the movements of celestial bodies with remarkable precision, developing mathematical concepts and observational techniques that enabled accurate predictions of solar and lunar eclipses, planetary conjunctions, and seasonal changes. The Maya created several interlocking calendrical cycles, including a 260-day ritual calendar, a 365-day solar calendar, and the long count system that tracked longer periods of time. The long count calendar represented one of the Maya's most sophisticated intellectual achievements. This system recorded dates as the number of days elapsed since a creation event that occurred on August 11, 3114 BC in the Gregorian calendar. Maya mathematicians conceived of time as cyclical rather than linear, with various periods of different lengths nested within larger cycles. The basic unit of the long count was the day, which combined with larger units including the Winal, Tun, Katun and Baktun to create a system capable of recording dates across vast spans of time. Maya mathematical concepts included the use of positional notation and the concept of zero, innovations that appeared in Mesoamerica independently of their development in other world regions. Maya numerals used a vigesimal system employing dots for units, bars for fives, and a shell-like symbol for zero. This mathematical sophistication enabled complex calculations required for astronomical predictions and architectural planning. Social stratification became increasingly pronounced during the late Preclassic period. Elite burials from sites like Caminal-Juyu in highland Guatemala contain elaborate grave goods including jade masks, obsidian eccentrics, and imported ceramics that demonstrate the accumulation of wealth and status symbols by ruling classes. These burials often featured complex architectural tombs with multiple chambers, stone sarcophagi, and painted murals depicting mythological scenes. The labour investment required for such elaborate interments indicates the emergence of hereditary elites with the power to command substantial community resources. Craft specialisation expanded beyond pottery production to include stone carving, jade working, obsidian knapping, and textile manufacture. Archaeological evidence from workshop areas shows that skilled artisans produced standardised tools, ornaments, and ritual objects for distribution throughout Maya communities. The technical expertise required for jade carving, which involved cutting extremely hard stone using string saws and abrasive sand, indicates the development of specialised knowledge passed down through generations of craftspeople. Settlement patterns during this period reveal increasing nucleation around ceremonial centres, with surrounding agricultural areas supporting growing populations. Site surveys in the Mirador Basin have identified dozens of interconnected settlements linked by raised stone causeways called sakbiob. These roadways, some extending for several kilometres, facilitated communication and transport between communities while demonstrating the organisational capacity of early Maya polities. The environmental context of early Maya civilization shaped many aspects of cultural development. The tropical forest environment provided abundant natural resources, including construction materials, medicinal plants, and diverse food sources, while also presenting challenges including seasonal water scarcity, tropical diseases, and soil fertility limitations. Maya communities developed sophisticated ecological knowledge that enabled sustainable resource management across diverse environmental zones, from coastal plains to highland valleys to dense tropical forests. Agricultural techniques adapted to local environmental conditions included terracing on steep slopes, raised fields in wetland areas, and forest gardens that mimicked natural forest succession patterns. These diverse agricultural strategies supported population densities that exceeded those of many other tropical regions, demonstrating the effectiveness of Maya environmental management practices. The period concluding around 250 AD marked the end of the Preclassic era and the transition to the Classic period of Maya civilization. By this time, Maya communities had established the fundamental cultural, technological, and social foundations that would support the florescence of Maya civilization during the following centuries. The archaeological record from this formative period reveals a trajectory of increasing social complexity, technological innovation, and cultural sophistication that set the stage for the remarkable achievements of classic Maya civilization. The architectural achievements that emerged during the late Preclassic period represented a quantum leap in Maya engineering capabilities and urban planning sophistication. El Mirador stands as perhaps the most spectacular example of this transformation, with its massive pyramidal complexes demonstrating construction techniques that would influence Maya architecture for centuries. The site's El Tigre Pyramid rises 55 meters above the forest floor, while the Ladanta complex achieves its remarkable 72-meter height through a carefully planned arrangement of 3 pyramids built atop an enormous basal platform measuring 310 by 590 meters. The engineering precision required for these structures involved calculating precise angles for structural stability, organizing massive quarrying operations, and coordinating the labor of thousands of workers across multiple construction seasons. The construction process at El Mirador reveals sophisticated planning and execution capabilities. Workers quarried limestone blocks from nearby outcrops using stone tools and wooden levers, then transported these materials using log rollers and rope systems along specially constructed causeways. The pyramid cores consisted of carefully arranged rubble fill, contained within retaining walls of cut stone blocks, with outer facades featuring precisely fitted limestone veneer. Mortar made from burned limestone provided strong bonding agents that have preserved these structures for over 2 millennia. Archaeological excavations have revealed construction phases spanning several centuries, with successive rulers adding new levels and architectural elements to existing structures. Nakbe, though smaller than El Mirador, demonstrates equally impressive urban planning concepts. The site features a central ceremonial precinct surrounded by residential areas connected by a network of raised causeways. The largest structure, known as Structure 1, reaches 45 meters in height and incorporates architectural elements that became standard features of Maya monumental construction. Steep-sided pyramids topped by temple structures, elaborate stairways flanked by sculptural elements, and complex interior arrangements of chambers and passages. The precision of stone cutting and fitting at Nakbe required specialized tools, including obsidian blades, limestone abradas, and wooden measuring devices that enabled workers to achieve remarkably straight edges and precise angles. Early Tikal emerged during this period as another significant centre, though its greatest architectural achievements would come later. Pre-classic construction at Tikal included the earliest versions of what would become the site's famous temple pyramids, with Structure 5 C54 representing one of the oldest monumental buildings in the central Payton. These early structures established architectural conventions that would persist throughout Maya history, including the use of corbelled arch construction, the integration of sculptural elements with architectural forms, and the orientation of buildings according to astronomical alignments. The development of Maya hieroglyphic writing during this period represents one of humanity's most significant intellectual achievements. The system evolved from earlier Mesoamerican writing traditions, but incorporated unique Maya innovations that created the most sophisticated script developed in the pre-Columbian Americas. Early Maya scribes combined approximately 800 distinct signs, including logograms representing complete words and syllabic signs representing individual sounds. This mixed system allowed for multiple ways of spelling the same word, providing scribes with flexibility in creating texts while maintaining readability across different Maya languages and dialects. The earliest securely dated Maya hieroglyphic inscription appears on Stela 29 from Tikal, bearing a long count date equivalent to 292 AD, though earlier examples likely exist on perishable materials that have not survived. These early texts primarily recorded calendrical information, royal names and titles, and references to important ceremonial events. The complexity of early Maya writing suggests a lengthy period of development, with scribal schools training specialists in the intricate rules governing sign usage, grammatical structure, and orthographic conventions. Maya mathematical concepts achieved remarkable sophistication during the pre-classic period, with innovations that paralleled or exceeded developments in other world regions. The Maya independently developed the concept of zero as both a placeholder and a number, representing this concept with a shell-like glyph, that appeared in mathematical and calendrical calculations. Their vigesimal numbering system used combinations of dots, bars, and the zero symbol to record numbers of virtually unlimited size. This mathematical framework enabled complex astronomical calculations, architectural planning computations, and the creation of intricate calendrical systems. The long count calendar system demonstrates the practical application of Maya mathematical knowledge. This system recorded dates as the number of days elapsed since the Maya creation date, using a modified vigesimal system with positions representing days, 20-day months, 360-day years, 20-year periods, and 400-year cycles. Maya astronomers used this system to predict celestial events with remarkable accuracy, including solar and lunar eclipses, Venus cycles, and the movements of other planets. The precision of these calculations required sophisticated observational techniques and mathematical models that accounted for the irregular patterns of celestial motion. Trade networks during the pre-classic period connected Maya communities across vast distances, facilitating the exchange of raw materials, finished goods, and cultural ideas. Obsidian from the volcanic highlands of Guatemala and El Chayal travelled hundreds of kilometres to lowland sites, where skilled knappers fashioned the volcanic glass into razor-sharp blades, projectile points, and ceremonial objects. The distribution patterns of different obsidian sources reveal complex exchange relationships, with some communities specialising in particular types of stone tool production, while others served as intermediaries in long-distance trade networks. Jade held special significance in Maya culture, representing water, vegetation, and the breath of life. The primary source of jade in Mesoamerica was the Motagua Valley in eastern Guatemala, from which raw materials travelled to workshops throughout the Maya region. Maya lapidaries developed sophisticated techniques for working this extremely hard stone, using string saws with abrasive sand to cut complex shapes and drilling hollow reeds with sand to create perforations for jewellery and ceremonial objects. The technical skill required for jade carving represented specialised knowledge passed down through generations of craftspeople, with master artisans capable of creating intricate mosaics, portrait masks, and sculptural representations of deities and rulers. Cacao cultivation and trade established economic relationships that would persist throughout Maya history. The tropical tree thrived in the humid lowlands of the Maya region, producing pods containing beans that served both as currency and as the basis for a chocolate beverage consumed by elites during religious ceremonies. Archaeological evidence from preclassic sites includes specialized ceramic vessels designed for cacao preparation and consumption, featuring distinctive shapes and decorative motifs associated with cacao mythology. The standardization of cacao beans as a medium of exchange required sophisticated systems for evaluating quality and quantity, contributing to the development of market institutions and commercial practices. Marine shells from both Pacific and Caribbean coasts reached inland Maya communities through established trade routes. Pacific thorny oyster shells provided raw materials for ornaments and ceremonial objects, while Caribbean conch shells served as trumpets in religious ceremonies and as sources of material for jewellery and decorative inlays. The processing of these materials required specialised knowledge of shell anatomy and properties, with craftspeople developing techniques for cutting, grinding, and polishing that maximised the aesthetic qualities of finished products. Religious practices during the pre-classic period established fundamental concepts that would persist throughout Maya civilization. Archaeological evidence reveals the veneration of natural features including caves, which the Maya conceived as entrances to the underworld realm of the dead and the gods. Cave sites throughout the Maya region contain evidence of ceremonial activities, including offerings of pottery, jade ornaments, and human remains. These underground spaces served as locations for divination rituals, ancestor veneration, and communication with supernatural forces. The construction of the first major pyramids and temple complexes reflected both religious beliefs and advanced engineering capabilities. These structures served as artificial mountains connecting the earthly realm with the celestial sphere, providing elevated platforms for ceremonies that brought rulers and priests closer to the gods. The internal arrangements of temple buildings included specialized chambers for different types of rituals, with features such as benches for offerings, niches for sacred objects, and openings aligned with astronomical phenomena. Architectural sculpture during this period achieved remarkable artistic and technical sophistication. The facades of major buildings featured elaborate stucco decorations depicting mythological scenes, royal portraits, and cosmic symbolism. These sculptural programs required teams of specialized artists working in coordination to create unified decorative schemes that communicated complex religious and political messages. The technical challenges of working in stucco, which had to be applied and carved while still damp, demanded precise timing and coordination among craftspeople. Burial practices during the pre-classic period reveal increasing social stratification and the emergence of hereditary elites. High-status interments featured elaborate tomb architecture, including stone-lined chambers, corbelled vaults, and painted murals depicting journeys to the underworld. The grave goods accompanying these burials included jade masks, obsidian blades, ceramic vessels containing food offerings, and textiles that have decomposed but left impressions on metal objects. The labour investment required for such elaborate burials indicates the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of ruling families. Water management systems developed during this period demonstrate sophisticated hydraulic engineering adapted to the challenges of tropical environments. Maya engineers constructed networks of canals, reservoirs, and drainage systems that captured rainwater during the wet season and stored it for use during the dry months. At El Mirador, archaeologists have identified an extensive system of canals and reservoirs that collected water from a catchment area of over 100 square kilometres. These hydraulic systems required precise grading to ensure proper water flow, sophisticated understanding of hydrology, and coordinated maintenance efforts involving entire communities. The raised causeway systems, or sac biob, that connected major sites, represent another significant engineering achievement. These elevated roadways, constructed from limestone blocks and rubble fill, maintained level grades across varied terrain and provided all-weather transportation routes between communities. The longest known pre-classic Sacbe extends over 13 kilometres between El Mirador and Nakbe, requiring the movement of thousands of tons of construction materials and demonstrating the organisational capacity of early Maya polities. Settlement patterns during this period reveal increasing nucleation around ceremonial centres, with populations concentrating in areas that provided access to monumental architecture, administrative services, and trade networks. Site surveys in the Mirador Basin have identified over 80 interconnected settlements linked by causeways and sharing similar architectural styles and ceramic traditions. This settlement clustering suggests the emergence of regional polities centred on major sites like El Mirador and Nakbe, with smaller communities serving specialised functions within broader economic and political systems. Agricultural intensification supported growing populations through the development of diverse cultivation strategies adapted to local environmental conditions, in addition to the basic crops of maize, beans, and squash. Maya farmers cultivated cotton for textile production, chili peppers for seasoning and trade, and tree crops including avocado, sapodilla, and bread nut. Forest management practices included the creation of forest gardens that combined useful trees with understory crops, providing sustainable yields while maintaining forest cover that prevented soil erosion and supported wildlife populations. The period from 1000 BC to 250 AD thus witnessed the transformation of Maya society from small agricultural villages to complex urban centres with monumental architecture, sophisticated writing systems, and extensive trade networks. The achievements of this era established the cultural, technological, and social foundations that would support the remarkable florescence of Maya civilization during the subsequent Classic period. The transition from the pre-Classic to the Classic period marked a fundamental shift in Maya political organisation, as the monumental centres established during the previous centuries evolved into true city-states governed by hereditary dynasties whose power extended across vast territories. The archaeological record from this period reveals the emergence of complex political hierarchies, with rulers claiming divine authority and establishing elaborate court systems that would define Maya governance for the next 6 centuries. Tikal emerged as one of the earliest and most powerful Classic period dynasties, with its ruling lineage tracing their authority back to a founder named Yaks-eb-Zuk, whose reign began around 90 AD according to later dynastic records. The site's strategic location in the heart of the Peyton rainforest provided access to crucial trade routes connecting the Caribbean coast with highland Guatemala, while abundant limestone quarries and fertile agricultural lands supported a growing population that would eventually exceed 100,000 inhabitants. The early Tikal rulers constructed increasingly elaborate architectural complexes that served both ceremonial and administrative functions, with the North Acropolis becoming the primary burial ground for successive kings whose tombs were marked by towering funerary pyramids. The political structure at Tikal during this formative Classic period centred on the Ajor, or divine king, who served as the earthly representative of the gods and held absolute authority over military, religious and economic affairs. Below the king stood a hierarchy of nobles bearing titles such as Sajal and Aj-Kuhun, who administered different aspects of governance including tribute collection, military command and diplomatic relations with neighbouring polities. These high-ranking officials often governed subsidiary settlements on behalf of the paramount ruler, creating networks of political control that extended far beyond the urban core. Palenque, situated in the foothills of the Chiapas highlands, developed a distinctive political tradition that emphasised the role of royal women in dynastic succession. The site's earliest securely dated ruler, Kuk Bahlam I, established his dynasty around 431 AD, but the political innovations that would make Palenque famous emerged under later rulers who incorporated female lineage holders into the succession system. The architectural layout of Palenque reflected these political arrangements, with the palace complex serving as both royal residence and administrative centre, featuring a unique 4-storey tower that provided commanding views across the surrounding river valley. The palace architecture at Palenque demonstrates sophisticated understanding of structural engineering and environmental adaptation. The builders constructed multiple courtyards surrounded by long, narrow galleries with corbelled vault ceilings that provided cool interior spaces during the hot tropical days. Underground aqueducts channeled the Ortolam River beneath the palace floors, providing fresh water for royal consumption while creating a cooling effect that made the stone buildings more comfortable for their elite occupants. The famous tower, rising 15 metres above the main palace level, incorporated a complex internal stairway system and may have served astronomical observation functions in addition to its symbolic role as a marker of royal authority. Copan, located in the southeastern periphery of the Maya region in modern Honduras, established its dynastic tradition under Kinich Yaks Uk Mo, who arrived at the site around 426 AD and founded a ruling lineage that would govern for over 4 centuries. The political organisation at Copan reflected its frontier location, with the ruling dynasty maintaining connections to both Maya lowland traditions and highland Mexican influences. The site's acropolis served as the primary royal compound, with successive rulers adding new structures and modifying existing buildings to reflect changing political circumstances and dynastic claims. The establishment of these major dynastic centers required sophisticated administrative systems capable of managing complex agricultural economies, extensive trade networks, and large populations. Maya scribes developed elaborate record-keeping systems that tracked tribute payments, military campaigns, and ceremonial obligations, using hieroglyphic texts inscribed on stone monuments, painted on ceramic vessels, and written in bark paper codices. The standardization of administrative practices across different polities suggests regular diplomatic contact and cultural exchange between ruling elites. Warfare during this period evolved from small-scale raiding to systematic campaigns designed to capture territory, control trade routes, and extract tribute from defeated enemies. Maya military organization centered on professional warrior classes led by nobles who combined military command with administrative responsibilities. Warriors used a variety of weapons, including obsidian-tipped spears, wooden clubs embedded with sharp stone blades, and atlatl spear throwers that provided greater range and accuracy than hand-thrown projectiles. Defensive strategies included the construction of earthworks, wooden palisades, and strategically located watchtowers that provided early warning of approaching enemies. The concept of overlordship emerged as powerful rulers extended their authority over smaller neighbouring polities through a combination of military conquest, diplomatic marriage, and economic coercion. These tributary relationships created hierarchical networks of political control, with paramount rulers claiming authority over lesser kings who retained local autonomy while acknowledging the supremacy of their overlords. The archaeological evidence for these relationships includes shared artistic styles, similar architectural features, and hieroglyphic texts that record the visits of subordinate rulers to the courts of their overlords. Architectural innovations during this period reflected both practical needs and symbolic requirements of divine kingship. The corbelled arch, which had appeared in earlier Maya construction, became a standard feature of palace and temple buildings, allowing architects to create spacious interior chambers without the structural limitations imposed by post and lintel construction. The technical challenges of corbelled vault construction required precise calculation of load-bearing requirements and careful selection of stone blocks with appropriate weight and strength characteristics. Palace complexes grew increasingly elaborate as rulers competed to demonstrate their wealth and power through architectural display. These sprawling compounds typically included residential quarters for the royal family, administrative offices for government officials, workshops for luxury craft production, and ceremonial spaces for court rituals. The arrangement of buildings within palace complexes followed strict protocols that reflected social hierarchies, with the most important structures occupying elevated positions and featuring the most elaborate decorative elements. The integration of astronomical alignments in ceremonial buildings became increasingly sophisticated during this period, reflecting the growing importance of calendar-based rituals in Maya political and religious life. Temple pyramids were oriented to capture the light of rising or setting celestial bodies at specific times of year, creating dramatic visual effects that reinforce the connection between earthly rulers and cosmic forces. The caracol at Chichen Itza, though built later, exemplifies the astronomical sophistication that Maya architects achieved, with its circular tower containing windows aligned with Venus positions at key points in that planet's cycle. Maya artistic expression reached new levels of sophistication during the early Classic period, with regional styles developing distinctive characteristics while maintaining shared iconographic traditions. Sculptors working in limestone, jade, and other materials created increasingly naturalistic representations of rulers and deities, moving beyond the stylized forms of earlier periods to achieve remarkable portraits that captured individual facial features and expressions. The technical mastery required for such work involved understanding the structural properties of different stone types, developing specialized tools for carving and polishing, and coordinating the work of multiple craftspeople on large sculptural programs. Ceramic production during this period achieved both technical and artistic excellence, with potters developing new firing techniques that produced stronger vessels with more vibrant surface colours. The polychrome ceramics of the early classic period featured complex mythological scenes painted with mineral-based pigments that maintained their colours for over a millennium. These vessels served both practical and ceremonial functions, with elaborate cylindrical vases used for serving chocolate drinks during elite feasting events, and smaller bowls designed for burning copal incense during religious ceremonies. Regional artistic styles emerged as different polities developed distinctive approaches to sculpture, painting and architectural decoration. The Peton style, exemplified by works from Tikal and surrounding sites, emphasized bold geometric patterns combined with naturalistic representations of rulers and supernatural beings. Palenque artists developed a more refined approach, characterized by delicate low-relief carving and subtle modeling of human forms. Copan sculptors created some of the most technically accomplished three-dimensional sculptures in the Maya region, with portrait heads that achieved almost photographic realism in their depiction of individual rulers. The iconographic traditions established during this period drew upon ancient Maya religious concepts while incorporating new elements that reflected the political needs of divine kingship. Royal portraits typically showed rulers in elaborate costumes that identified them with specific deities, particularly the maize god, whose death and resurrection symbolized the agricultural cycle that sustained Maya civilization. The feathered serpent motif, representing the union of earth and sky, appeared frequently in royal iconography, often framing portraits of rulers or serving as a vehicle for their spiritual transformation. Jade working reached unprecedented levels of sophistication during the early classic period, with master craftspeople creating intricate mosaics, portrait masks and jewellery that required hundreds of hours of painstaking labour. The techniques involved in jade carving included sawing with string and abrasive sand, drilling with hollow reeds, and polishing with increasingly fine abrasives to achieve the lustrous surfaces prized by Maya elites. The most elaborate jade objects were reserved for royal burials, where they served as symbols of rebirth and eternal life. Trade networks during this period became increasingly specialized and extensive, with different communities focusing on particular products while participating in regional exchange systems that distributed goods across hundreds of kilometers. Obsidian continued to be a major trade commodity, but the early classic period saw the development of more sophisticated distribution systems that moved different types of volcanic glass to communities where they was most needed. Pachuca obsidian from central Mexico, prized for its green colour and superior knapping qualities, reached Maya sites through complex exchange relationships that may have involved state-level diplomatic contacts. The political alliances that emerged during this period created networks of cooperation and competition that shaped Maya history for centuries. Marriage alliances between ruling families established kinship ties that could be activated for military support, trade agreements, or diplomatic negotiations. These relationships were commemorated in hieroglyphic texts that recorded the genealogies of ruling families and celebrated important ceremonial events such as royal weddings, heir designation ceremonies, and diplomatic visits. Military architecture became increasingly sophisticated as warfare intensified between competing polities. Defensive walls constructed around urban cores provided protection for civilian populations during sieges, while strategically located fortresses controlled access to important resources and trade routes. The construction of these defensive works required significant investments of labour and materials, indicating the serious nature of military threats faced by classic period Maya communities. The administrative systems developed during this period enabled Maya rulers to govern complex societies with diverse populations and economic activities. Tribute systems extracted agricultural surplus from rural communities to support urban populations and fund monumental construction projects. Specialized administrators tracked these contributions using sophisticated accounting methods recorded in hieroglyphic texts and maintained in archives that have not survived but are referenced in later historical documents. The administrative innovations established during the early Classic period provided the foundation for an unprecedented expansion of Maya civilization between 600 and 900 AD, as urban centres swelled to accommodate populations that dwarfed anything previously seen in Mesoamerica. Tikal reached its zenith during this period, with archaeological surveys revealing a metropolitan area encompassing over 575 square kilometres that supported an estimated 425,000 inhabitants through an intricate network of raised fields, terraced hillsides, and forest gardens that maximised agricultural productivity across diverse ecological zones. The site's urban core contained over 3,000 structures ranging from modest residential compounds to towering temple pyramids, connected by an elaborate system of causeways and plazas that facilitated movement and communication throughout the sprawling city. The agricultural systems that sustained these massive populations represented technological achievements of remarkable sophistication. Maya engineers constructed extensive networks of raised fields in seasonal wetlands, creating elevated planting surfaces separated by canals that provided irrigation water during dry periods while ensuring proper drainage during the rainy season. These Bayo systems, covering thousands of hectares around major centres like Tikal and Calakmul, produced multiple crops per year through intensive cultivation techniques that included crop rotation, intercropping, and the application of organic fertilizers derived from canal sediments and household waste. Archaeological investigations have revealed field systems with individual plots measuring 15 to 100 metres in length and 2 to 4 metres in width, separated by canals ranging from 1 to 15 metres in width that serve both transportation and water management functions. Terraced agriculture on hill slopes around sites like Caracol in Belize supported dense populations through the creation of level planting surfaces that prevented soil erosion while maximising the use of available land. These terracing systems incorporated sophisticated drainage features, including stone-lined channels that diverted excess water during heavy rains and retention walls that prevented the loss of fertile topsoil. The construction of agricultural terraces required massive labour investments, with some systems extending across several square kilometres and involving the movement of millions of tons of soil and stone. The productivity of these intensified agricultural systems enabled population densities that reached 500 to 700 people per square kilometre in some areas, figures that approached those of modern intensive agricultural regions. Forest management practices complemented field-based agriculture through the creation of managed groves that combined useful trees with understory crops in sustainable production systems. Maya farmers maintained orchards of breadnut trees, whose protein-rich seeds provided nutritional supplements during periods when maize harvests were insufficient. Cacao groves in humid lowland areas produced the beans that served as both currency and the basis for elite chocolate beverages, while cotton cultivation in drier regions supplied raw materials for the textile production that clothed Maya society from commoners to kings. The integration of tree crops with annual plants created diverse agricultural landscapes that supported both human populations and the wildlife that provided protein through hunting. The intellectual achievements of this period established the Maya as the most sophisticated astronomers and mathematicians in the pre-Columbian Americas. Royal courts employed professional astronomer priests who maintained detailed observational records spanning centuries, enabling them to predict celestial events with accuracy that would not be surpassed until the development of modern astronomical instruments. The Dresden Codex, though compiled later, preserves calculation methods developed during this period that enabled Maya astronomers to predict solar eclipses hundreds of years in advance, accounting for the complex periodicities that govern the apparent motions of the Sun, Moon and Earth. Venus observations achieved particular sophistication during this period, with Maya astronomers tracking the planet's synodic cycle of 584 days and its relationship to the solar year with mathematical precision that exceeded contemporary European knowledge. Temple structures at sites like Zoltán in Guatemala contain astronomical tables painted on interior walls that record Venus positions over periods spanning several centuries. These calculations required understanding complex mathematical relationships, including the recognition that 5 Venus cycles equal 8 solar years minus 2 days, a relationship that Maya astronomers used to maintain accurate long-term calendrical correlations. Lunar calculations during this period enabled Maya astronomers to predict eclipses with remarkable accuracy across extended time periods. The lunar series recorded in classic period inscriptions demonstrates sophisticated understanding of the 405 lunation cycle that governs long-term variations in lunar motion. Maya mathematicians calculated that 405 lunar months equal 11,958 days, a figure accurate to within hours of modern astronomical measurements. This precision enabled them to create eclipse tables that remained accurate for centuries, providing rulers with powerful tools for timing important political and religious events. Mathematical innovations during this period included the development of computational techniques that enabled complex astronomical calculations using the vigesimal number system. Maya mathematicians created efficient methods for multiplication and division that avoided the computational difficulties inherent in working with large numbers. They developed algorithms for calculating calendar correlations that enabled the conversion between different calendrical systems, including the 260-day ritual calendar, the 365-day solar calendar, and the long count system that tracked longer periods of time. The concept of mathematical infinity appeared in Maya calculations dealing with vast time periods, with inscriptions recording dates millions of years in the past and future. These calculations required understanding of place value notation and the manipulation of extremely large numbers using positional arithmetic. The precision of these mathematical operations demonstrates the existence of educational institutions that trained specialists in advanced computational techniques, suggesting the presence of formal schools or apprenticeship systems that preserved and transmitted mathematical knowledge across generations. Historical record-keeping reached unprecedented levels of detail during this period, with royal scribes maintaining dynastic chronicles that recorded the reigns, conquests, and ceremonial activities of successive rulers. The hieroglyphic texts carved on stone monuments and painted on ceramic vessels provide detailed accounts of political events, military campaigns, and diplomatic relationships that enable modern scholars to reconstruct the complex political history of classic Maya civilization. These records reveal the names and dates of hundreds of rulers, their family relationships, and the specific events that marked their reigns. Palenque's palace complex exemplifies the architectural achievements of this period, with its multi-story buildings incorporating advanced engineering solutions to structural and environmental challenges. The palace tower, rising 4 stories above the main courtyard level, required sophisticated understanding of load distribution and foundation stability to support its weight on the underlying limestone bedrock. The building's internal organisation included residential apartments for the royal family, administrative offices for government officials, audience halls for receiving visitors, and storage facilities for tribute goods and administrative records. The engineering solutions employed in palace construction included the use of concrete-like mortar made from burned limestone that provided strong bonding between stone blocks, while remaining flexible enough to accommodate minor structural movements. Interior spaces featured corbelled vault ceilings that distributed weight evenly across supporting walls, while creating spacious chambers for various activities. The integration of hydraulic systems within the building complex included aqueducts that channeled fresh water through interior courtyards and drainage systems that removed wastewater and storm runoff. Temple 4 at Tikal represents the pinnacle of Maya pyramidal construction, rising 65 meters above the surrounding forest floor to create one of the tallest pre-Columbian structures in the Americas. The pyramid's construction required the quarrying and transport of approximately 200,000 tons of limestone blocks, organized into a carefully planned structural system that distributed the enormous weight across a broad foundation platform. The building's internal organization included multiple chambers connected by narrow passages, with the uppermost temple containing specialized rooms for astronomical observations and religious ceremonies. The construction sequence for Temple 4 revealed sophisticated project management capabilities, with different work crews responsible for quarrying, transport, and assembly operations coordinated across multiple construction seasons. The pyramid's exterior featured precisely fitted limestone veneer blocks that created smooth surfaces decorated with elaborate stucco sculptures depicting royal portraits and mythological scenes. The technical challenges of working at such heights required the development of scaffolding systems and lifting devices that enabled workers to position heavy stone blocks with precision while maintaining construction quality standards. Monumental construction projects during this period required unprecedented coordination of human resources, with major building campaigns employing thousands of workers across extended periods. The organisation of these construction efforts involved specialised supervisors who coordinated different aspects of the work, from quarrying operations in distant stone sources to the final placement of decorative elements on completed buildings. The logistics of supplying construction sites with materials and provisions required sophisticated planning and resource management capabilities that demonstrate the administrative sophistication of classic Maya polities. Military expansion during this period created complex networks of political control that extended Maya influence across vast territories through combinations of conquest, diplomacy, and economic coercion. Tikal's military campaigns under rulers like Jasor Chan Kafwil resulted in the defeat of rival polities, including Calakmul, and the establishment of tributary relationships that brought wealth and prestige to the victorious dynasty. These military successes were commemorated in elaborate stone monuments that recorded the dates of battles, the names of captured enemies, and the specific territories brought under Tikal's control. Calakmul emerged as Tikal's primary rival during this period, with its rulers organising military alliances that challenged Tikal's dominance across the central Petén region. The site's strategic location near the border between modern Guatemala and Mexico provided access to trade routes connecting the Maya lowlands with highland Mexico, while its agricultural hinterland supported a population that may have exceeded 200,000 inhabitants. Calakmul's rulers constructed massive pyramidal complexes that rivaled those at Tikal, including Structure 2, which rises 55 meters above the surrounding plaza level and contains over 2.5 million cubic meters of construction fill. Diplomatic relationships during this period involved complex negotiations between ruling dynasties that established marriage alliances, trade agreements, and military pacts. Royal women played crucial roles in these diplomatic arrangements, with high-ranking princesses marrying into foreign dynasties to cement political alliances between their natal and marital polities. These marriage relationships created kinship networks that could be activated for military support during conflicts or economic cooperation during times of resource scarcity. The expansion of Maya influence during this period extended beyond military conquest to include cultural and economic penetration of peripheral regions. Maya merchants established trading posts in areas far from the major urban centres, spreading Maya artistic styles, religious practices, and technological innovations to communities that maintained their own distinct cultural traditions while participating in broader Maya commercial networks. These cultural exchanges resulted in the adoption of Maya calendar systems, writing practices, and architectural styles by non-Maya groups throughout Mesoamerica. Intercity relationships during this period involved complex hierarchies of political authority, with paramount rulers claiming overlordship over lesser kings who retained local autonomy while acknowledging the supremacy of their overlords. These tributary relationships were maintained through regular tribute payments, ceremonial visits to overlord courts, and participation in military campaigns organised by the dominant polity. The archaeological evidence for these relationships includes shared artistic styles, similar architectural features, and hieroglyphic texts that record the subordination ceremonies where lesser rulers acknowledged their tributary status. Trade networks during this period achieved unprecedented geographic extent and commercial sophistication, with Maya merchants travelling hundreds of kilometres to obtain exotic goods for elite consumption and religious ceremonies. Obsidian from highland Guatemala sources reached Maya sites throughout the lowlands, while jade from the Motagua Valley was distributed across networks that extended from the Yucatan Peninsula to the Pacific coast of Chiapas. Marine shells from both Atlantic and Pacific coasts provided raw materials for jewellery and ceremonial objects, with different shell species preferred for specific types of ornaments and ritual implements. The organisation of long-distance trade involved specialised merchant classes who maintained trading relationships across political boundaries and cultural differences. These professional traders possessed detailed knowledge of travel routes, seasonal conditions, and local political situations that enabled them to navigate the complex landscape of competing Maya polities. They carried not only material goods, but also information about political developments, technological innovations, and cultural practices that facilitated communication and cultural exchange across the Maya region. The mathematical sophistication that underpinned Maya civilization during its height represented one of humanity's most remarkable intellectual achievements, with innovations that paralleled or exceeded contemporary developments in other world regions. Maya mathematicians independently developed the concept of zero, not merely as a placeholder, but as a true number capable of mathematical operations, representing this revolutionary concept with a distinctive shell-shaped glyph that appeared in calculations ranging from simple arithmetic to complex astronomical computations. Their vigesimal system, based on counts of 20 rather than the decimal system familiar to modern users, employed elegant combinations of dots representing units, bars representing fives, and the shell symbol for zero to record numbers of virtually unlimited magnitude. The practical applications of Maya mathematical knowledge extended far beyond abstract calculations to encompass the precise engineering requirements of monumental architecture. The construction of Temple 4 at Tikal, rising 65 metres above the forest floor, required calculations involving load distribution, foundation stability, and structural integrity that demanded sophisticated understanding of geometric relationships and proportional mathematics. Maya architects computed the precise angles necessary for corbelled vault construction, determining the maximum span possible for given wall thicknesses while ensuring adequate safety margins for the enormous stone structures they created. These calculations involved complex trigonometric relationships that Maya engineers solved using their vigesimal system, demonstrating practical mathematical applications that enabled architectural achievements unmatched elsewhere in the pre-Columbian Americas. Astronomical observations during this period achieved precision that would not be surpassed until the development of modern telescopic instruments. Maya astronomer priests maintained detailed records of celestial phenomena spanning multiple centuries, creating databases of observations that enabled accurate predictions of eclipses, planetary conjunctions, and seasonal changes crucial for agricultural planning and religious ceremonies. The Venus tables preserved in the Dresden Codex represent calculations originally developed during the Classic period, tracking the planet's synodic cycle of 584 days with mathematical precision that accounted for the complex variations in Venus's apparent motion caused by the elliptical orbits of both Venus and Earth. The sophistication of Maya Venus calculations becomes apparent when examining their methods for correlating Venus cycles with the solar calendar. Maya astronomers recognized that 5 Venus synodic periods equal 2,920 days, while 8 solar years equal 2,922 days, creating a discrepancy of only 2 days across this 8-year period. They developed correction factors that maintained accurate Venus predictions across centuries of observations, adjusting their calculations to account for the gradual drift that would otherwise render their tables useless for long-term forecasting. These computational techniques required understanding of complex mathematical relationships involving least common multiples and modular arithmetic that demonstrated theoretical sophistication comparable to ancient Babylonian astronomy. Lunar calculations achieved similar levels of precision through the development of mathematical models that accounted for the irregular variations in lunar motion. Maya astronomers tracked the Moon's synodic period of approximately 29.53 days with accuracy sufficient to predict eclipses decades in advance, using tables that recorded the precise intervals between successive lunar phases. Their eclipse calculations incorporated understanding of the 18-year Saros cycle that governs the repetition of eclipse patterns, enabling them to predict not only when eclipses would occur, but also their duration, magnitude, and visibility from specific geographic locations. The mathematical framework underlying these astronomical calculations involved sophisticated algorithms for handling fractional quantities within the vigesimal number system. Maya mathematicians developed computational techniques that enabled precise division and multiplication of large numbers, creating methods for calculating calendar correlations that maintained accuracy across the multiple interlocking cycles of their complex temporal system. The long count calendar required calculations involving periods ranging from single days to cycles lasting over 5,000 years, demanding mathematical operations with numbers containing dozens of digits that Maya scribes performed with remarkable accuracy using their positional notation system. Water management systems throughout the Maya region demonstrated engineering capabilities that rivaled those of contemporary civilizations in other parts of the world. At Tikal, hydraulic engineers constructed an integrated network of reservoirs, canals, and dams that captured rainwater from a catchment area exceeding 100 square kilometers, storing over 900,000 cubic meters of water for use during the 8-month dry season. The system incorporated sophisticated filtration techniques using sand and gravel beds that removed sediments and organic matter from stored water, while carefully designed spillways prevented overflow damage during exceptional rainfall events. The engineering principles governing Maya water management systems required understanding of hydrology, geology, and materials science that enabled the construction of durable infrastructure adapted to tropical environmental conditions. Reservoir walls built from limestone blocks and mortar withstood centuries of seasonal flooding and drought cycles, while canal systems maintained proper gradients across distances of several kilometers to ensure adequate water flow without erosion damage. The integration of these hydraulic systems with urban planning created sustainable water supplies that supported population densities exceeding 500 people per square kilometre in areas that would otherwise have been uninhabitable during dry seasons. Palenque's hydraulic engineering achievements included the construction of pressurized aqueduct systems that channel the Otolim River through underground passages beneath the palace complex. These sophisticated waterworks incorporated settling basins that removed sediments from the river water, distribution chambers that divided flow between different palace areas, and drainage systems that removed wastewater and storm runoff from interior courtyards. The technical challenges of creating watertight underground channels through limestone bedrock required advanced masonry techniques and waterproofing methods using natural hydraulic cement that remained effective for over a millennium. Agricultural engineering during this period achieved remarkable sophistication through the development of raised field systems that transformed seasonal wetlands into highly productive agricultural zones. These biosystems incorporated complex hydraulic controls that enabled farmers to regulate water levels according to crop requirements and seasonal conditions, creating microenvironments optimized for different plant species. The construction of raised fields required precise surveying to ensure proper drainage gradients, while the integration of fish cultivation and canal systems provided additional protein sources and organic fertilizers that enhanced soil fertility. The technical knowledge required for raised field construction included understanding of soil physics, plant physiology, and ecosystem management that enabled Maya farmers to create sustainable agricultural systems adapted to challenging tropical environments. Field construction involved the excavation of millions of cubic meters of soil and organic matter, organized into elevated planting surfaces measuring 15 to 100 meters in length and 2 to 4 meters in width. The organic-rich sediments dredged from canals provided continuous soil amendments that maintained fertility across centuries of intensive cultivation, while the aquatic ecosystems and canal systems supported fish populations that supplemented agricultural production with protein-rich foods. Terracing systems on hill slopes around sites like Caracol demonstrated equally sophisticated engineering approaches to agricultural intensification. These systems incorporated retaining walls built from carefully fitted limestone blocks that prevented soil erosion, while creating level planting surfaces on steep terrain. The design of terraced fields included sophisticated drainage features that diverted excess water during heavy rains while retaining moisture during dry periods, creating optimal growing conditions for maize, beans, and other crops across diverse topographic settings. Medical knowledge among the Maya encompassed sophisticated understanding of human anatomy, disease processes, and pharmacological treatments derived from the region's extraordinarily diverse plant communities. Maya healers possessed detailed knowledge of medicinal plants, with ethnobotanical studies identifying over 500 species used in traditional Maya medicine for treating conditions ranging from common ailments to complex surgical procedures. The preparation of plant medicines required understanding of active compounds, dosage calculations, and administration methods that demonstrated sophisticated pharmacological knowledge comparable to traditional medical systems in other world regions. Surgical procedures performed by Maya medical practitioners included trepanation operations that required precise knowledge of cranial anatomy and sterile techniques to prevent infection. Archaeological evidence from Maya burials reveals successful trepanation procedures with evidence of bone healing, indicating that patients survived these operations and recovered from their injuries. The tools used for surgical procedures included obsidian blades sharper than modern steel scalpels, bone needles for suturing wounds, and specialized instruments for specific operations that demonstrated the existence of professional medical practitioners with advanced technical skills. Dental practices among the Maya included sophisticated procedures for treating tooth decay, installing decorative inlays, and performing cosmetic modifications that reflected both medical knowledge and aesthetic preferences. Maya dentists used jade, obsidian, and other materials to create tooth inlays that required precise drilling techniques and adhesive methods that maintained their position for decades. The tools and techniques used for dental work included drills made from hollow bird bones, abrasive compounds for tooth preparation, and plant-based adhesives that provided durable bonds between tooth enamel and decorative materials. Botanical knowledge encompassed detailed understanding of plant cultivation, selective breeding, and crop improvement techniques that enabled Maya farmers to develop numerous varieties of maize, beans, squash, and other crops adapted to different environmental conditions. The development of maize varieties optimized for specific growing conditions required understanding of plant genetics and selective breeding principles that enabled farmers to enhance desired characteristics while maintaining genetic diversity within crop populations. Maya farmers developed early maturing varieties for areas with short growing seasons, drought-resistant strains for arid regions, and high-yield cultivars for intensive agricultural systems. The cultivation of medicinal plants required specialized knowledge of growing conditions, harvesting techniques, and processing methods that preserved the active compounds responsible for therapeutic effects. Maya botanical gardens maintained collections of medicinal plants from diverse ecological zones, enabling healers to access rare species and experiment with new combinations of therapeutic compounds. The preservation of plant medicines involved sophisticated drying, fermentation, and storage techniques that maintained potency across extended periods while preventing contamination or degradation. Forest management practices demonstrated ecological knowledge that enabled sustainable resource extraction while maintaining biodiversity and ecosystem services essential for long-term environmental stability. Maya foresters maintained managed groves of useful trees, including cacao, breadnut, sapodilla, and mahogany that provided food, materials, and trade goods without destroying forest ecosystems. These management systems incorporated understanding of forest succession, soil requirements, and species interactions that enabled the creation of productive landscapes that supported both human needs and wildlife populations. The integration of agricultural and forest management systems created complex landscape mosaics that maximized productivity while maintaining environmental sustainability. Maya land managers understood the relationships between different vegetation types, soil conditions, and water availability that enabled them to optimize land use across diverse ecological zones. These integrated systems provided multiple products, including food crops, construction materials, medicinal plants, and trade goods, while maintaining the ecological processes that supported long-term productivity. Engineering achievements in Maya architecture incorporated sophisticated understanding of materials science, structural mechanics, and environmental adaptation that enabled the construction of monumental buildings designed to withstand tropical climate conditions for centuries. The development of hydraulic cement using burned limestone and organic additives created mortar that remained waterproof and structurally sound across extended periods of exposure to heavy rains, high humidity, and temperature fluctuations. The selection and preparation of building stones involved understanding of limestone geology, quarrying techniques, and stone-cutting methods that produced precisely fitted blocks capable of supporting enormous structural loads. The acoustic properties of Maya architectural spaces demonstrated sophisticated understanding of sound transmission and architectural acoustics that enabled the creation of buildings optimized for specific ceremonial and administrative functions. Ball courts incorporated design features that amplified and focused sound waves, enabling speakers at one end of the court to be heard clearly at distances exceeding 100 meters. Temple buildings featured acoustic properties that enhanced the dramatic effect of ceremonial activities, with corbelled vault ceilings that created resonance chambers optimized for musical performances and ritual chanting. The intricate pantheon that governed Maya spiritual life encompassed hundreds of deities whose influence permeated every aspect of daily existence, from the planting of crops to the conduct of warfare. Itzamnaj, the supreme creator deity, presided over this celestial hierarchy as the lord of the heavens and inventor of writing, whose aged visage appeared in Maya art with distinctive square eyes, a hooked nose, and often a headband bearing the Akibal glyph symbolizing darkness and the primordial void from which creation emerged. This ancient god manifested in multiple aspects throughout the Maya cosmos, appearing as Itzamnaj Na, the house deity who protected domestic spaces, and as the patron of scribes and calendar keepers whose divine inspiration enabled the complex calculations that governed Maya temporal systems. Kukulkan, the feathered serpent deity whose name translates as feathered snake, embodied the fundamental Maya concept of duality through his combination of earthbound serpentine characteristics with the celestial attributes of flight. Artistic representations depicted this deity as an enormous snake with brilliant green quetzal feathers covering his undulating body, often emerging from the jaws of stylized mountains or architectural facades during specific astronomical alignments that marked crucial points in the agricultural calendar. The deity's association with wind and rain made him essential to agricultural success, while his role as a culture hero who brought civilization to humanity established his importance in royal ideology and dynastic legitimacy claims. Chark, the rain deity whose four directional aspects governed precipitation across the Maya cosmos, appeared in artistic representations with distinctive curved fangs, a long proboscis-like nose, and tear markings beneath his eyes that symbolized the life-giving rains essential for agricultural prosperity. The four Chaks occupied the cardinal directions and corners of the Maya universe, each distinguished by specific color associations: red for the east, white for the north, black for the west, and yellow for the south. These directional rain gods wielded stone axes that created thunder when striking clouds, while their serpentine lightning bolts brought both destruction and renewal to the earthly realm. The complex mythology surrounding these major deities intertwined with hundreds of lesser supernatural beings who governed specific aspects of natural phenomena, human activities, and cosmic processes. The Bakubs, four elderly gods who supported the corners of the sky, prevented the collapse of the celestial realm while serving as patrons of beekeepers and scribes. Ikchel, the moon goddess associated with weaving, medicine, and childbirth, appeared in dual aspects as both a young, beautiful woman and an aged crone, whose wisdom encompassed the mysteries of life and death. Her lunar associations connected her to the complex calendrical calculations that governed ritual timing, while her role as patroness of midwives made her essential to the continuation of human society. Agricultural deities occupied positions of paramount importance in Maya religious practice, reflecting the civilization's dependence on successful crop production for survival and prosperity. The maize god, depicted as a young man with an elongated skull representing a maize cob, embodied the cyclical nature of agricultural production through his mythological death and resurrection that paralleled the annual planting and harvesting cycle. His iconographic representations showed him emerging from the earth or from the shell of a turtle that symbolized the primordial landmass, often accompanied by his sons, the hero twins, whose adventures in the underworld established the cosmic order that enabled agricultural success. The Tzolk'in, the sacred 260-day calendar that governed ritual activities throughout Maya civilization, combined 20 named days with 13 numbers in an intricate cycle that determined the auspicious timing for ceremonies, agricultural activities, and political events. Each of the 20-day signs possessed specific supernatural associations and directional orientations that influenced the character of activities undertaken on particular dates. Imix, the first-day sign represented by a water lily or crocodile head, governed beginnings and creation, making it favourable for initiating new projects or conducting ceremonies related to fertility and abundance. Ik, symbolised by wind or breath, connected to communication and spiritual inspiration, while Akbal, represented by darkness or night, related to introspection and contact with ancestral spirits. The integration of the Tzolk'in with agricultural cycles created a sophisticated system for timing farming activities according to both practical environmental factors and spiritual requirements. Planting ceremonies conducted on days governed by earth and water deities ensured divine protection for growing crops, while harvest festivals scheduled according to solar calendar positions celebrated the successful completion of agricultural cycles. The mathematical relationships between the 260-day ritual calendar and the 365-day solar year created complex patterns that repeated every 52 years, marking major ceremonial cycles that required elaborate preparations and community-wide participation. Maya concepts of the afterlife reflected sophisticated theological thinking about the nature of death, spiritual transformation, and posthumous existence across multiple realms of being. The underworld, known as Xibalba or Place of Fear, encompassed 9 levels through which deceased souls journeyed before reaching their final destinations, determined by the circumstances of their deaths and their social status during life. Warriors who died in battle and women who perished in childbirth bypassed the dangerous underworld journey to join the sun god in his daily passage across the sky, while rulers and nobles underwent elaborate transformation processes that enabled them to become deified ancestors capable of influencing earthly affairs. The royal tombs discovered at Palenque provide extraordinary insights into elite burial practices and afterlife concepts through their architectural sophistication and elaborate grave goods. The Temple of Inscriptions, constructed as the funerary monument for the ruler Kinich Janab Pakalverst, incorporated a hidden stairway leading to a burial chamber located 5 meters below the temple floor, where the king's remains lay within a massive stone sarcophagus carved with intricate scenes depicting his journey to the underworld and subsequent rebirth as the maze god. The sarcophagus lid, weighing over 5 tons, featured a complex iconographic program showing the deceased ruler falling into the jaws of the earth monster, while the world tree grew from his body, symbolizing the cosmic renewal achieved through royal death and transformation. The grave goods accompanying Pakal's burial included a jade mosaic mask covering his face, jade ornaments adorning his body, and ceramic vessels containing food offerings for his underworld journey. The jade mask, composed of over 200 individual pieces fitted together to recreate the ruler's facial features, embodied Maya beliefs about jade's life-giving properties and its association with water, vegetation, and eternal life. The intricate craftsmanship required to create this masterpiece involved months of careful planning and execution by master artisans who understood both the technical requirements of jade working and the symbolic significance of different iconographic elements. Tikal's North Acropolis served as the primary royal cemetery for the site's ruling dynasty across several centuries, with successive kings constructing increasingly elaborate funerary pyramids above the tombs of their predecessors. Burial 116, containing the remains of Jasor-chan Kawil Verst, exemplifies the elaborate mortuary practices associated with divine kingship through its architectural complexity and extraordinary assemblage of grave goods. The tomb chamber, constructed from precisely fitted limestone blocks and sealed with hydraulic cement, contained the ruler's remains surrounded by jade ornaments, obsidian blades, ceramic vessels, and organic materials including textiles and wooden objects that have decomposed but left impressions in surrounding sediments. The positioning of grave goods within royal tombs followed specific protocols that reflected beliefs about the deceased ruler's continued needs in the afterlife and his ongoing responsibilities to his living descendants. Jade celts positioned near the ruler's hands symbolized his continued ability to perform agricultural ceremonies essential for community prosperity, while obsidian blades represented his military authority and capacity to defend his people against supernatural threats. Ceramic vessels containing cacao, maize gruel, and other foods provided sustenance for the dangerous underworld journey, while incense burners enabled communication with deities and ancestors through aromatic offerings. Ritual bloodletting practices formed a central component of Maya religious observance, connecting human participants with divine forces through the sacrifice of their most precious bodily fluid. Royal bloodletting ceremonies involved the use of obsidian blades, stingray spines, and bone perforators to pierce tongues, earlobes, and genitals, with the flowing blood collected on bark paper that was then burned to create aromatic smoke carrying prayers and offerings to the gods. These auto-sacrificial practices required considerable physical courage and spiritual preparation, with participants often fasting and maintaining sexual abstinence for extended periods before major bloodletting ceremonies. The iconographic representations of bloodletting rituals on Maya monuments and ceramic vessels reveal the elaborate paraphernalia and procedures associated with these sacred practices. Rulers and nobles appear in artistic depictions, drawing cord through perforated tongues, with vision serpents emerging from the blood-soaked paper to manifest ancestors and deities summoned through the sacrifice. The technical aspects of these ceremonies required specialized knowledge of human anatomy to ensure that blood could be drawn safely without causing permanent injury, while the timing of bloodletting events according to calendrical calculations enhanced their spiritual efficacy. Human sacrifice, though less common than auto-sacrificial practices, played crucial roles in major ceremonies marking dynastic transitions, military victories, and calendrical celebrations. Archaeological evidence from sites throughout the Maya region reveals various forms of sacrificial practices, including heart extraction, drowning, shooting with arrows, and ritual decapitation, each associated with specific deities and ceremonial contexts. The cenote sagrado at Chichen Itza yielded hundreds of sacrificial victims thrown into the sacred well during drought periods, with offerings of jade, gold, copal incense, and human beings intended to petition Chark for life-giving rains. The selection of sacrificial victims followed specific criteria related to age, gender, physical characteristics, and social status that varied according to the requirements of different deities and ceremonial occasions. Children sacrificed to rain gods were often selected for their unblemished appearance and their symbolic association with purity and renewal, while adult warriors captured in battle provided appropriate offerings to solar deities and war gods. The preparation of sacrificial victims involved elaborate rituals including body painting, costume adornment, and ritual purification that transformed them into sacred offerings worthy of divine acceptance. The bull game, known in Maya languages as pits, served as both athletic competition and religious ritual that reenacted cosmic conflicts between opposing forces of light and darkness, life and death, order and chaos. Bull courts throughout the Maya region featured distinctive architectural forms, with sloping walls that created acoustic properties, enabling spectators to hear the sounds of the solid rubber ball striking playing surfaces across considerable distances. The Great Bull Court at Chichen Itza, measuring 168 metres in length and 70 metres in width, represents the largest known bull game facility in Mesoamerica, with walls rising 12 metres above the playing surface and acoustic properties that enable normal conversation at one end to be heard clearly at the opposite end. The religious symbolism associated with the bull game connected the athletic competition to fundamental Maya myths about the hero twins' victory over the lords of death in the underworld. Players wore elaborate protective gear including padded hip yokes, knee guards, and helmets that enabled them to strike the heavy rubber ball using only their hips, shoulders and forearms while preventing serious injuries during the vigorous competition. The rubber balls used in the game, weighing up to 4 kilograms, were manufactured from latex harvested from rubber trees through complex processes that created spherical objects capable of bouncing with sufficient force to cause serious injuries or death if they struck players improperly. The ritual aspects of bull game competitions included elaborate pre-game ceremonies involving offerings to patron deities, purification rituals for players and equipment, and divination practices that determined favourable timing for matches. Post-game ceremonies often involved the sacrifice of losing players or captive warriors, with their deaths symbolically reenacting the cosmic victories that maintained universal order. The architectural integration of bull courts with temple complexes and royal palaces emphasized the game's religious significance and its role in legitimizing political authority through divine sanction. The architectural traditions that emerged across the Maya region during the Classic period reflected sophisticated regional variations in construction techniques, decorative preferences, and urban planning concepts that demonstrated both shared cultural foundations and distinct local innovations. The Petun style, exemplified by the monumental complexes at Tikal, Waxaktun, and El Mirador, emphasized vertical monumentality through the construction of towering pyramidal structures that rose above the forest canopy to create visible landmarks across vast distances. These massive constructions employed thick masonry walls with rubble-filled cores, steep-sided profiles that maximized height while conserving materials, and relatively simple geometric forms that achieved dramatic visual impact through sheer scale rather than elaborate surface ornamentation. The technical characteristics of Petun architecture required sophisticated engineering solutions to support the enormous structural loads created by pyramids reaching heights of 65 meters or more. Builders developed construction techniques using limestone blocks quarried from nearby outcrops, shaped using stone tools and wooden levers, then fitted together with hydraulic cement made from burned limestone mixed with organic additives. The core construction employed carefully organised rubble fill, contained within retaining walls, creating stable internal structures capable of supporting the massive weight of outer stone veneers and superstructure temples. Foundation systems extended deep into bedrock through the excavation of trenches filled with large stone blocks that distributed structural loads across broad areas of underlying limestone. The Chen's architectural tradition, centered in the northern Yucatan Peninsula, developed distinctive decorative approaches that transformed building facades into elaborate sculptural compositions representing supernatural beings and cosmic symbols. Qin's builders created monster-mouthed doorways where temple entrances appeared as the open jaws of earth deities, with elaborate mosaic facades constructed from hundreds of individually carved stone elements fitted together to create complex iconographic programs. The technical mastery required for Qin's decoration involved precise planning of sculptural compositions across entire building facades, with master carvers creating templates that enabled multiple craftsmen to produce coordinated, decorative elements that assembled into unified artistic statements. Structure 2 at Chicana exemplifies Qin's architectural achievement through its extraordinary facade decoration that transforms the entire building front into the face of a supernatural being. The central doorway represents the creature's mouth, flanked by elaborate eye elements and crowned by a complex headdress incorporating multiple layers of carved stone mosaic work. The construction of such facades required months of careful planning and execution, with sculptors creating full-scale drawings on plaster surfaces before beginning the carving of individual stone elements. The fitting of these carved pieces demanded extraordinary precision, as errors in measurement or execution could render entire sections of decoration unusable. The Puuc architectural style, flourishing in the hills of northwestern Yucatan, achieved remarkable sophistication through the development of construction techniques that enable the creation of thin-walled buildings with large interior spaces and elaborate geometric facade decorations. Puuc builders mastered the production of precisely cut limestone veneer stones that created smooth wall surfaces decorated with intricate mosaic patterns, while their innovative use of concrete-like cores enabled the construction of walls significantly thinner than those employed in other Maya regions. This technical advancement allowed for the creation of multi-story buildings, with spacious interior chambers connected by broad doorways that facilitated air circulation in the hot, humid climate. The Palace of the Governor at Uxmal represents the pinnacle of Puuc architectural achievement through its extraordinary length of 97 meters, sophisticated proportional relationships, and elaborate facade decoration combining geometric patterns with naturalistic sculptural elements. The building's construction required the quarrying and precise shaping of over 20,000 individual stones, each cut to specific dimensions that enabled the creation of smooth wall surfaces decorated with step fret patterns, lattice designs, and sculptural masks representing rain deities and other supernatural beings. The building's orientation incorporated astronomical alignments that connected its architectural form with celestial phenomena, particularly the southernmost rising position of Venus, demonstrating the integration of architectural planning with astronomical observation. The technical innovations of Puuc architecture included the development of boot-shaped stones that created strong mechanical bonds between veneer and core materials, preventing the separation of facade elements that had plagued earlier construction techniques. These specially shaped stones extended from exterior surfaces deep into wall cores, creating interlocking systems that distributed structural loads while maintaining the precise alignments necessary for geometric facade decorations. The masonry techniques employed in Puuc construction achieved such precision that joints between adjacent stones remained virtually invisible, creating the appearance of monolithic surfaces despite the complex assembly of thousands of individual elements. Maya artistic achievement reached extraordinary levels of sophistication through the development of jade working techniques that transformed one of the world's hardest stones into intricate sculptures, jewellery, and ceremonial objects of breathtaking beauty and technical complexity. The jade workshops at Cancún in Guatemala reveal the sophisticated tools and techniques employed by Maya lapidaries, including string saws operated with abrasive sand that enable the cutting of complex curves and internal hollows, tubular drills made from bird bones that created precise perforations for jewellery assembly, and polishing stones of various grades that achieved the lustrous surfaces prized in finished jade objects. The jade head of the storm god from Copan demonstrates the extraordinary artistic and technical mastery achieved by Maya sculptors working in this challenging medium. The portrait, carved from a single piece of blue-green jadeite, captures individual facial features with remarkable naturalism, while incorporating symbolic elements that identify the subject as a supernatural being associated with wind and rain. The technical challenges of creating such a work included understanding the internal structure and grain patterns of the jade rough, planning the sculpture to avoid flaws and inclusions that could cause breakage during carving, and achieving the precise surface modelling that gives the face its lifelike appearance. The mosaic jade masks discovered in royal tombs throughout the Maya region represent perhaps the most technically complex jade working achievements in the ancient Americas. These elaborate constructions, composed of hundreds of individual pieces fitted together to recreate human facial features, required months of careful planning and execution by teams of master craftsmen. The mask of Kinich Janab Pakal I from Palenque consists of over 200 individual jade pieces, each shaped to specific contours and fitted with such precision that the assembled mask appears as a unified sculptural work despite its complex composite construction. The technical processes involved in creating jade mosaics included the initial design phase, where artists created templates showing the size and shape of each individual piece, followed by the careful selection of jade materials with appropriate colour variations to achieve desired visual effects. The cutting of individual mosaic pieces required extraordinary skill in manipulating string saws and abrasive compounds to achieve precise dimensions, while the final assembly involved the use of organic adhesives and mechanical fastening systems that held the pieces in position within supporting frameworks of wood or other perishable materials. The monumental stone sculptures that adorned Maya ceremonial centres achieved remarkable artistic sophistication through the development of carving techniques that enabled the creation of three-dimensional compositions of unprecedented complexity and naturalistic detail. The sculptural programs at Copan, particularly those decorating the hieroglyphic stairway and surrounding structures, demonstrate the extraordinary level of artistic achievement possible when master sculptors had access to high-quality limestone and unlimited time for careful execution. These works combine architectural function with sculptural artistry, creating integrated compositions that serve both structural and aesthetic purposes while communicating complex mythological and historical narratives. Stella A. at Copan exemplifies Maya sculptural mastery through its portrayal of the ruler 18 rabbit in elaborate ceremonial costume, with every detail of costume elements, jewellery and headdress carved with meticulous attention to texture, pattern and symbolic meaning. The sculptor achieved remarkable three-dimensional modelling of the human figure, while incorporating dozens of individual costume elements, each requiring specialised carving techniques adapted to its specific material properties and decorative requirements. The feathered elements of the ruler's costume display individual barb structures, while textile patterns show the complex weaving techniques employed in actual Maya garments. The technical aspects of Maya stone sculpture involve sophisticated understanding of limestone geology and carving properties, with sculptors selecting specific types of stone for different artistic requirements. The fine-grained limestone preferred for detailed portrait work required different tools and techniques than the coarser stone used for architectural sculpture, while the hardest limestone varieties demanded specialised approaches that combined percussion techniques with abrasive methods to achieve desired surface finishes. The tools employed in Maya sculpture included chert and obsidian chisels for fine detail work, limestone hammers for rough shaping, and abrasive stones for surface finishing and polishing. The sophisticated mural painting traditions that developed at sites like Bonampak achieved artistic excellence through the mastery of complex pigment preparation techniques and sophisticated compositional strategies that created narrative paintings of extraordinary visual impact and historical significance. The Bonampak murals, covering the interior walls of 3 chambers in Structure 1, present detailed scenes of royal ceremonies, military campaigns and captive sacrifice that provide unparalleled insights into classic Maya court life and political practices. The technical execution of these paintings required the preparation of smooth plaster surfaces, the creation of stable mineral and organic pigments, and the development of painting techniques that enabled the creation of complex multi-figure compositions with sophisticated spatial relationships and naturalistic detail. The pigment technology employed in Maya mural painting incorporated both mineral and organic colorants that provided the brilliant hues and long-lasting stability evident in surviving examples. Maya blue, a distinctive turquoise pigment unique to Mesoamerica, resulted from the combination of indigo dye with a specific type of clay that created a stable colorant resistant to fading and chemical degradation. The preparation of this pigment required sophisticated understanding of chemical processes, with Maya artists heating mixtures of indigo and palygorskite clay to precise temperatures that enable the formation of stable molecular bonds between organic and mineral components. The compositional sophistication of Bonampak Room 2 demonstrates Maya artists' mastery of complex narrative painting through its depiction of a military victory celebration involving dozens of individual figures arranged in multiple registers that create convincing spatial depth despite the two-dimensional medium. The artist employed sophisticated perspective techniques, including overlapping figures, size variation to indicate distance, and architectural elements that create spatial frameworks for the narrative action. The individual figures display remarkable portrait-like qualities, with facial features, costume details, and body positions that suggest the artist worked from direct observation of actual court ceremonies and participants. The technical challenges of mural painting in tropical environments require the development of specialized plaster formulations and painting techniques adapted to high humidity conditions that could cause rapid deterioration of painted surfaces. Maya artists created multiple plaster layers with different compositions optimized for specific functions, including rough base coats that provided adhesion to stone walls, intermediate layers that created smooth painting surfaces, and final coats that sealed painted surfaces against moisture penetration. The timing of painting operations required careful coordination with plaster curing processes as pigments had to be applied while underlying surfaces retained appropriate moisture content for proper adhesion. The development of Maya literature represented one of the most sophisticated writing traditions in the pre-Columbian Americas, with scribal schools producing texts that encompassed historical chronicles, astronomical treatises, religious mythology, and administrative records written in hieroglyphic scripts of remarkable complexity and expressive power. The surviving codices, though representing only a tiny fraction of Maya literary production, demonstrate the extraordinary intellectual achievements of Maya scribes, who created works combining scientific precision with artistic beauty through their mastery of both linguistic and visual communication systems. The Dresden Codex, the most complete surviving Maya manuscript, contains astronomical tables of unprecedented accuracy that enabled Maya astronomer priests to predict eclipses, planetary positions, and other celestial phenomena across extended time periods. The Venus tables in this codex demonstrate mathematical sophistication through their use of correction factors that maintained predictive accuracy across centuries of observations, while the eclipse tables incorporate understanding of complex astronomical cycles that govern the occurrence of solar and lunar eclipses. The preparation of such texts required years of careful observation, calculation, and verification by teams of specialist astronomer scribes who possess both mathematical expertise and artistic skills necessary for creating the beautiful, illustrated manuscripts that preserve their knowledge. The Madrid Codex focuses primarily on divination and ritual practices, providing detailed instructions for ceremonies associated with different calendar periods and seasonal activities. The text includes elaborate illustrations showing proper procedures for offerings, costume requirements for ritual participants, and astronomical conditions favourable for specific ceremonies. The artistic quality of these illustrations demonstrates the high level of training required for Maya scribes, who combine detailed knowledge of religious practices with sophisticated artistic skills that enabled them to create visual representations of complex ceremonial procedures. The technical aspects of codex production involved the preparation of bark paper from fig trees, the creation of stable writing surfaces through the application of lime-based sizing, and the development of carbon-based inks that provided permanent, fade-resistant text. The bark paper preparation process required specialized knowledge of tree selection, bark harvesting techniques, and fiber processing methods that created flexible, durable writing surfaces capable of surviving for centuries under proper storage conditions. The sizing applications that prepared paper surfaces for writing involved lime-based compounds that sealed paper fibers while creating smooth surfaces that prevented ink bleeding and enabled precise hieroglyphic formation. The sophisticated urban planning concepts that governed Maya city design incorporated complex relationships between ceremonial architecture, residential areas, water management systems, and transportation networks that created functional urban environments adapted to tropical forest conditions while expressing fundamental cosmological concepts through their spatial organization. The integration of natural landscape features with architectural constructions created urban compositions that enhanced rather than dominated their environmental settings, demonstrating sophisticated understanding of ecological relationships and sustainable development principles. The causeway systems that connected different sectors of Maya cities represented major engineering undertakings that required sophisticated surveying techniques, massive labour investments, and long-term maintenance programs to preserve their functionality across centuries of use. The Coba Causeway network, extending over 100 kilometres through dense forest terrain, incorporated sophisticated drainage systems, bridge structures, and surface treatments that enabled all-weather transportation while minimising environmental disruption. The construction of these elevated roadways required the quarrying and transport of millions of tons of limestone blocks, organised into carefully engineered structures that maintained level grades across varied topography. The integration of water management systems with urban planning created sustainable cities that supported large populations through sophisticated hydraulic technologies adapted to seasonal rainfall patterns and tropical environmental conditions. The reservoir systems at Tikal collected rainwater from urban surfaces and surrounding forest areas, storing over 900,000 cubic meters of water in artificial lakes that provided year-round water supplies for domestic use, craft production, and ceremonial activities. These systems incorporated filtration technologies using sand and gravel beds that removed sediments and organic contaminants, while carefully designed distribution networks carried clean water to different city sectors through gravity-fed systems that required no mechanical pumping devices. The sophisticated commercial networks that sustained Maya civilization during its height represented one of the most complex economic systems ever developed in the pre-Columbian Americas, with trade routes extending from central Mexico to Panama and connecting diverse ecological zones through intricate exchange relationships that moved both raw materials and finished goods across thousands of kilometers. These extensive networks emerged from the geographical diversity of the Maya region itself, where coastal plains rich in salt and marine resources, volcanic highlands abundant in obsidian and jade, and tropical lowlands producing cacao and exotic feathers created natural complementarities that encouraged specialized production and long-distance exchange. The obsidian trade formed the backbone of Maya commercial networks, with volcanic glass from highland Guatemala sources traveling hundreds of kilometers to reach consumers throughout the lowlands, who valued this material for its razor-sharp cutting edges and ceremonial significance. The El Chayal source, located northeast of modern Guatemala City, produced a distinctive translucent grey obsidian that Maya nappers fashioned into prismatic blades of extraordinary sharpness, while the San Martin Gilotepec source yielded a darker, more opaque variety preferred for larger tools and weapons. Archaeological analysis of obsidian artifacts from lowland sites reveals sophisticated distribution systems that move different types of volcanic glass according to specific functional requirements, with the finest translucent varieties reserved for ceremonial objects and surgical instruments, while coarser materials served everyday cutting needs. The technical expertise required for obsidian blade production concentrated in specialized workshops where master nappers possessed detailed knowledge of stone fracture mechanics and the specific characteristics of different obsidian types. These craftsmen employed sophisticated reduction techniques that maximized the number of usable blades produced from each obsidian core, achieving efficiency ratios that exceeded 90% utilization of raw materials. The production process began with the preparation of polyhedral cores through careful percussion flaking that created the precise angles necessary for blade removal, followed by pressure flaking techniques using antler or hardwood tools that detach long, parallel-sided blades with cutting edges sharper than modern steel scalpels. The organization of obsidian distribution involved multiple levels of exchange relationships, from direct procurement expeditions organized by major centers to complex networks of intermediary traders who specialized in moving volcanic glass between different regions. Evidence from workshop areas at sites like Colha in Belize reveals large-scale production facilities where specialized nappers processed obsidian obtained through long-distance trade, creating finished tools for local consumption and re-export to surrounding communities. The standardization of blade forms and production techniques across these workshops suggests the existence of training systems that transmitted technical knowledge and quality standards throughout the Maya region. Jade working represented another crucial component of Maya trade networks, with the green stone serving both practical and symbolic functions that made it one of the most valued materials in Mesoamerican commerce. The primary source of jade in the Maya region was the Motagua Valley in eastern Guatemala, where geological processes had concentrated deposits of jadeite and other greenstones, prized for their hardness, colour, and symbolic associations with water and vegetation. Maya prospectors developed sophisticated techniques for locating jade deposits in river gravels and bedrock outcrops, using their understanding of geological processes to identify areas where tectonic activity had brought jade-bearing rocks to the surface. The technical challenges of jade working required specialized knowledge and tools that transformed this extremely hard material into intricate ornaments, ceremonial objects, and architectural elements. Maya lapidaries employed string saws operated with abrasive sand to cut jade into desired shapes, a process that could require weeks of continuous work for complex pieces. The creation of jade jewellery involved drilling techniques using hollow bird bones or copper tubes rotated with sand abrasives to create perforations for stringing, while surface finishing required progressively finer abrasives that achieved the lustrous polish characteristic of high-quality jade objects. The distribution of jade artifacts throughout the Maya region reveals sophisticated networks of specialized craftsmen who transformed raw materials into finished goods according to regional preferences and local artistic traditions. Workshop areas at sites like Cancun in Guatemala contained evidence of large-scale jade processing operations, with thousands of jade chips and production debris indicating intensive manufacturing activities that supplied finished objects to consumers across the Maya lowlands. The standardization of certain jade object types, particularly ear flares and ceremonial celts, suggests the existence of production standards that facilitated trade while maintaining quality expectations among elite consumers. Cacao cultivation and trade established economic relationships that extended far beyond the Maya region, with the chocolate-producing tree serving as both a source of luxury beverages and a standardized medium of exchange throughout Mesoamerica. The tropical climate requirements of cacao trees limited their cultivation to specific ecological zones within the Maya lowlands, creating natural monopolies that generated substantial wealth for communities controlling productive cacao groves. Archaeological evidence from sites in the Ulua Valley of Honduras and the Soconusco region of Chiapas reveals intensive cacao cultivation systems that supported specialized agricultural communities focused primarily on chocolate production for long-distance trade. The preparation of cacao for consumption required sophisticated processing techniques that transformed the bitter raw seeds into palatable beverages through roasting, grinding, and mixing with various additives including chili peppers, vanilla, and honey. Maya cacao preparation involved stone matates specifically designed for grinding cacao beans, with basalt grinding surfaces that created the smooth paste necessary for proper beverage preparation. The serving of chocolate drinks employed specialized ceramic vessels with distinctive forms and decorations that identified their function while demonstrating the wealth and status of their owners. The standardization of cacao beans as currency throughout Mesoamerica required sophisticated systems for evaluating quality and preventing counterfeiting, with Maya merchants developing techniques for assessing bean size, color, and condition that ensured fair exchange rates across different markets. Historical sources from later periods describe elaborate procedures for cacao evaluation, including the removal of beans from pods to check for internal defects, and the sorting of beans according to size and color standards that determined their exchange value. The use of cacao currency facilitated trade relationships across linguistic and cultural boundaries, providing a common medium of exchange that enabled complex commercial transactions between diverse communities. Salt production along the Maya coast created another foundation for long-distance trade networks, with coastal communities developing sophisticated techniques for extracting salt from seawater and inland brine springs. The salt works at Salinas de los Nueve Cerros in Guatemala employed elaborate evaporation systems that concentrated brine solutions in shallow pans before final crystallization in ceramic vessels designed specifically for salt production. These specialized containers, known as salt cakes, could be transported inland where they were broken open to release the crystallized salt for consumption or further trade. The technical requirements of salt production involved detailed understanding of evaporation rates, crystallization processes, and seasonal variations in brine concentration that enabled producers to maximize yields while maintaining product quality. Maya salt makers developed techniques for purifying brine solutions through filtration and settling processes that removed organic matter and other impurities, creating white crystalline salt that commanded premium prices in inland markets. The transportation of salt required waterproof containers and careful handling to prevent contamination during long-distance transport through humid tropical environments. Cotton cultivation in drier regions of the Maya territory supported extensive textile production that supplied both local needs and long-distance trade markets with high-quality fabrics prized throughout Mesoamerica. The development of cotton varieties adapted to specific environmental conditions enabled Maya farmers to establish productive textile industries in areas where other crops might fail, creating economic opportunities that supported specialized weaving communities. Archaeological evidence from sites like Santa Rita Corozal in Belize reveals large-scale textile production facilities with dozens of spindle whorls and loom weights indicating intensive fiber processing and weaving activities. The technical aspects of Maya textile production involved sophisticated spinning and weaving techniques that created fabrics of extraordinary quality and durability. Maya weavers employed backstrap looms that enabled the creation of complex patterns and tight weaves through precise tension control and intricate manipulation of warp and weft threads. The preparation of cotton fibers required careful cleaning, combing and spinning processes that created uniform threads suitable for high-quality textile production, while dyeing techniques using organic colorants produced the brilliant colors that characterized Maya fabrics. The organization of textile production involved specialized workshops where master weavers supervised teams of assistants who performed different aspects of the manufacturing process, from fiber preparation through final finishing of completed textiles. The standardization of certain textile types, particularly the elaborate garments worn by nobles and rulers, suggests the existence of production standards that maintained quality while enabling efficient manufacturing of luxury goods for elite consumption. The distribution of finished textiles involved both local markets and long-distance trade networks that carried Maya fabrics to consumers throughout Mesoamerica. Marine shell working represented another specialized craft industry that supplied ornaments, tools, and ceremonial objects to communities throughout the Maya region through extensive trade networks connecting coastal and inland populations. Pacific coast species, including thorny oyster and conch shells, provided raw materials for jewelry and decorative objects, while Caribbean species such as queen conch supplied materials for trumpets and architectural ornaments. The processing of marine shells required specialized knowledge of shell anatomy and working properties, with craftsmen developing techniques for cutting, grinding, and polishing that maximized the aesthetic qualities of finished products. The technical challenges of shell working involved understanding the structural properties of different shell species and adapting cutting and shaping techniques to their specific characteristics. Thorny oyster shells, prized for their brilliant orange and red colours, required careful removal of the outer shell layers to reveal the colourful inner surfaces, while conch shells needed precise cutting to create the resonating chambers essential for trumpet function. The creation of shell mosaics involved cutting individual pieces to precise dimensions and fitting them together with organic adhesives that created durable decorative compositions. Market systems throughout the Maya region incorporated sophisticated mechanisms for price determination, quality control, and dispute resolution that enabled complex commercial transactions between diverse participants. Archaeological evidence from major centres reveals specialised market areas with permanent structures designed to accommodate large numbers of vendors and customers, while portable market facilities enabled periodic markets that served smaller communities on rotating schedules. The organization of these markets required administrative systems that regulated vendor access, maintained quality standards, and collected taxes or tribute from commercial activities. The integration of market systems with political authority created mechanisms for economic regulation that balance commercial freedom with state control over strategic resources and luxury goods. Maya rulers maintained monopolies over certain high-value trade items, including jade, obsidian, and cacao, while allowing free trade in everyday commodities such as pottery, textiles, and agricultural products. This selective regulation enabled states to generate revenue from commercial activities while maintaining the competitive markets that encouraged innovation and efficiency in craft production. The development of standardized weights and measures facilitated trade relationships across political boundaries and cultural differences, with Maya merchants employing consistent systems for evaluating quantities and qualities of traded goods. Archaeological evidence suggests the use of standardized ceramic vessels for measuring volumes of liquid and granular commodities, while stone weights enabled accurate measurement of valuable materials such as jade and precious metals. The maintenance of measurement standards required institutional mechanisms that prevented fraud and ensured fair dealing in commercial transactions. Professional merchant classes emerged to manage the complex logistics of long-distance trade, with specialized traders possessing detailed knowledge of travel routes, seasonal conditions, and local political situations that enabled them to navigate the challenging landscape of competing Maya polities. These merchants maintained trading relationships across political boundaries and cultural differences, often serving as diplomatic intermediaries who facilitated communication between different communities. The organization of merchant expeditions required substantial capital investments for purchasing trade goods, hiring porters, and providing security during dangerous journeys through contested territories. The transportation systems that supported Maya trade networks incorporated sophisticated solutions to the challenges of moving goods through dense tropical forests without wheeled vehicles or pack animals. Human porters carried trade goods along established trail networks that connected major centers with smaller communities and resource extraction sites, while canoe transport along rivers and coastal waters enabled the movement of bulk commodities such as salt and agricultural products. The organization of transportation required detailed knowledge of seasonal conditions, travel distances, and security considerations that affected the timing and routing of commercial expeditions. Warehouse and storage facilities at major trading centers provided secure locations for accumulating trade goods and maintaining inventory levels that enabled consistent supply to consumer markets. Archaeological evidence from sites like Karakol and Sunantunik reveals specialized storage buildings, with features designed to protect valuable commodities from moisture, pests, and theft. These facilities incorporated sophisticated ventilation systems that maintained appropriate environmental conditions for different types of stored goods, while security features including restricted access and guard positions protected valuable inventory from unauthorized removal. The economic networks that had sustained Maya civilization for centuries began experiencing severe disruptions during the 9th century AD, as environmental pressures combined with political instabilities to create cascading failures that would ultimately bring down the complex urban societies of the southern lowlands. Archaeological evidence from sediment cores extracted from lakes throughout the Payton region reveals dramatic changes in forest composition and agricultural intensity that coincided with the abandonment of major ceremonial centers, suggesting that environmental degradation played a crucial role in undermining the agricultural foundations of Maya civilization. Paleoclimatic reconstructions based on oxygen isotope analysis of cave formations and lake sediments indicate that the Maya region experienced a series of prolonged droughts between 800 and 900 AD, with some dry periods lasting over a decade and reducing rainfall to levels 40% below modern averages. These drought conditions proved particularly devastating because they coincided with peak population levels that had pushed agricultural systems to their maximum productive capacity. The sophisticated water management systems that had enabled Maya cities to thrive during previous dry periods became inadequate when faced with unprecedented combinations of reduced rainfall and increased demand from urban populations that may have exceeded 10 million inhabitants across the southern lowlands. The failure of reservoir systems at major centres like Tikal created cascading crises that affected every aspect of urban life. Archaeological investigations of the site's extensive hydraulic infrastructure reveal evidence of desperate attempts to maintain water supplies during the drought periods, including the construction of additional storage facilities and the deepening of existing reservoirs to access groundwater sources. Sediment analysis from these reservoirs shows dramatic increases in erosion products during the late Classic period, indicating that deforestation and agricultural intensification had destabilized watersheds and reduced the efficiency of water collection systems. The accumulation of toxic algae blooms in stagnant water supplies further compromised the quality of stored water, creating health crises that weakened urban populations already stressed by food shortages. Forest clearance had reached critical levels throughout the Maya lowlands by the 9th century, with pollen records indicating that some areas had lost over 90% of their original forest cover to agricultural expansion and fuelwood collection. This massive deforestation created environmental feedback loops that exacerbated drought conditions through reduced evapotranspiration and altered local climate patterns. The loss of forest cover also eliminated the wildlife populations that had provided crucial protein sources for Maya communities, while exposing thin tropical soils to erosion that permanently reduced agricultural productivity in many areas. Soil depletion became increasingly severe as intensive agricultural systems reached the limits of their sustainability. The raised field systems that had supported dense populations for centuries began showing signs of declining productivity as organic matter and canal sediments became exhausted and salt accumulation in poorly drained areas reduced crop yields. Archaeological surveys of agricultural areas around major centres reveal evidence of field abandonment during the late Classic period, with farmers apparently unable to maintain productivity levels necessary to support urban populations. The terraced hillslope systems that had enabled cultivation on marginal lands also showed signs of failure, with retaining walls collapsing due to inadequate maintenance and erosion gullies cutting through abandoned field systems. The agricultural crisis manifested differently across various ecological zones within the Maya region. Areas dependent on rainfall agriculture suffered most severely during drought periods, while communities with access to permanent water sources initially maintained higher productivity levels. However, even these favoured locations eventually experienced difficulties as refugee populations from drought-affected areas strained local resources and created conflicts over access to productive lands. The disruption of trade networks that had previously redistributed agricultural surpluses between different regions meant that local crop failures could no longer be offset through imports from more productive areas. Nutritional stress became increasingly evident in skeletal remains from late Classic period burials, with bioarchaeological analysis revealing increased frequencies of growth disruption indicators, dental pathologies, and disease markers that suggest widespread malnutrition among both elite and commoner populations. Infant and child mortality rates increased dramatically during the 9th century, while adult stature decreased as chronic malnutrition affected physical development. These biological indicators provide compelling evidence that agricultural systems were failing to meet the basic nutritional needs of Maya populations, creating demographic crises that undermined social stability and political authority. Political responses to the environmental crisis varied significantly between different Maya polities, with some rulers attempting to maintain traditional systems through increased ritual activities and monument construction, while others experimented with new forms of governance and resource management. The intensification of warfare during this period reflected both competition for scarce resources and attempts by ambitious rulers to expand their territories and tribute bases to offset local agricultural failures. However, these military campaigns often proved counterproductive, diverting labour and resources from agricultural production while creating additional refugee populations that strained already overwhelmed food systems. The breakdown of traditional alliance systems accelerated during the 9th century as formerly cooperative relationships dissolved under pressure from resource scarcity and population movements. Archaeological evidence from sites throughout the southern lowlands reveals the construction of defensive fortifications during this period, indicating that communities increasingly viewed their neighbours as threats rather than trading partners. The elaborate diplomatic protocols that had maintained peaceful relationships between Maya polities for centuries gave way to opportunistic raiding and territorial expansion as rulers struggled to maintain their authority in the face of mounting crises. Calakmul, which had served as a major political centre coordinating activities across the western Petun region, experienced rapid decline during the late 9th century as its ability to maintain tributary relationships collapsed. The site's monumental construction program ceased abruptly around 890 AD, with unfinished buildings providing stark evidence of the sudden withdrawal of labour and resources from public works projects. Hieroglyphic inscriptions from the site's final monuments reveal increasingly desperate attempts by rulers to maintain divine sanction through elaborate ceremonies and bloodletting rituals, suggesting that traditional religious responses to crisis were proving inadequate to address the scale of environmental and social challenges. Karakol in Belize experienced a similar pattern of rapid abandonment, with archaeological evidence indicating that the site's population declined by over 90% between 850 and 900 AD. The extensive agricultural terraces that had supported the site's large population were abandoned during this period, with erosion quickly destroying centuries of careful landscape modification. The site's elaborate water management systems also fell into disrepair, with reservoirs silting up and distribution channels becoming clogged with vegetation and debris. Copan's decline followed a somewhat different trajectory, with the site's peripheral areas being abandoned first, while the urban core maintained reduced populations for several decades longer. The famous hieroglyphic stairway, completed during the site's final construction phase around 755 AD, may represent an attempt by rulers to assert continuity with past glories, even as their political authority was crumbling. However, monument erection ceased entirely after 822 AD, and archaeological evidence suggests that the site's population had virtually disappeared by 900 AD. The collapse of centralised authority led to significant changes in settlement patterns throughout the southern lowlands, with populations concentrating in defensible locations such as hilltops and islands, while abandoning the ceremonial centres that had served as focal points for political and religious activities. These new settlements typically featured simpler architecture and reduced evidence of craft specialisation, suggesting that the complex economic systems that had characterised classic Maya civilization were breaking down along with political institutions. Trade networks that had connected Maya communities across vast distances experienced severe disruption as political instability made long-distance travel increasingly dangerous and reduced demand for luxury goods among declining elite populations. The obsidian trade from highland Guatemala sources virtually ceased in many lowland areas, while jade working workshops were abandoned as demand for ceremonial objects collapsed. The breakdown of these commercial relationships eliminated crucial sources of raw materials and finished goods that had supported specialized craft production and maintained technological knowledge across the Maya region. Religious responses to the crisis included both intensification of traditional practices and experimentation with new ritual forms that reflected changing social conditions. Archaeological evidence from some sites reveals increased frequencies of human sacrifice during the late Classic period, possibly representing desperate attempts to appease deities through more extreme offerings. However, the construction of new temples and ceremonial complexes virtually ceased throughout the southern lowlands, indicating that communities lack the resources and social organization necessary to maintain traditional religious institutions. The role of epidemic diseases in the Maya collapse remains uncertain due to the poor preservation of organic materials in tropical environments, but bioarchaeological evidence suggests that malnutrition and social stress may have increased susceptibility to infectious diseases that could have devastated already weakened populations. The concentration of refugee populations in unsanitary conditions would have facilitated disease transmission, while the breakdown of traditional food processing and storage systems may have increased exposure to foodborne pathogens. Social stratification systems that had maintained elite authority for centuries began breaking down as rulers lost their ability to provide the economic and military security that justified their privileged positions. Archaeological evidence from elite residential areas reveals hasty abandonment of elaborate palace complexes, with valuable objects left behind suggesting that occupants fled suddenly rather than organizing orderly relocations. The cessation of elite burial practices and monument construction indicates that the ideological foundations of divine kingship had collapsed along with the economic systems that supported royal courts. Demographic changes during the collapse period included both absolute population decline through mortality and emigration, as well as shifts in population distribution that saw survivors concentrating in areas with better access to water and agricultural resources. Bioarchaeological analysis of cemetery populations from this period reveals evidence of increased violence, with higher frequencies of traumatic injuries and defensive wounds suggesting that interpersonal conflict became more common as social controls weakened. The abandonment of major ceremonial centres proceeded rapidly once it began, with archaeological evidence suggesting that some sites lost 90% of their populations within a few decades. This rapid demographic decline created positive feedback loops that accelerated the collapse process, as reduced labour availability made it impossible to maintain the infrastructure systems that supported urban life. The sophisticated agricultural technologies that had enabled high population densities required constant maintenance that became impossible as populations fell below critical thresholds. Regional variations in the collapse process reflected differences in environmental conditions, political organisation, and access to resources that enabled some areas to maintain reduced populations longer than others. Communities with access to permanent water sources and fertile alluvial soils generally survived longer than those dependent on seasonal rainfall and marginal agricultural lands. However, even these favoured locations eventually experienced abandonment as the breakdown of regional trade networks and political institutions eliminated the economic relationships that had supported specialised communities. The northern Maya lowlands experienced different trajectories during this period, with some communities actually growing in size as refugees from the south sought new homes in areas less affected by drought and political collapse. This population movement contributed to cultural changes in northern sites, with architectural styles and ceramic traditions showing influences from southern traditions as immigrant populations brought new ideas and technologies to their adopted homes. The transformation of Maya civilization during the 9th century represented one of the most dramatic social collapses in human history, with sophisticated urban societies that had flourished for over 6 centuries disappearing within a few generations. The speed and completeness of this transformation suggests that Maya civilization had become vulnerable to systemic failure through its very success, as population growth and agricultural intensification created dependencies that could not be sustained when environmental conditions changed beyond the adaptive capacity of existing technologies and social institutions. The demographic and cultural transformations that swept through these southern Maya lowlands during the 9th century created unprecedented opportunities for communities in the northern Yucatan Peninsula, where different environmental conditions and established trade networks enabled not only survival, but remarkable cultural fluorescence during the centuries that followed the southern collapse. The northern regions, characterized by cenotes that provided reliable water sources and limestone soils better suited to intensive agriculture, attracted refugee populations from abandoned southern centers while simultaneously developing new forms of political organization and architectural expression that would define the final phase of pre-Columbian Maya civilization. Chichen Itza emerged as the dominant power in the northern Yucatan during the 10th century, establishing political and economic control over vast territories through a combination of military conquest, commercial dominance, and religious authority that differed significantly from the divine kingship systems that had characterized classic period polities. The site's strategic location near several major cenotes provided reliable water sources that enabled the support of large populations, while its position at the intersection of overland trade routes connecting the Caribbean coast with western Yucatan created opportunities for commercial expansion that generated unprecedented wealth and political influence. The architectural innovations at Chichen Itza reflected both continuity with earlier Maya traditions and significant influences from central Mexican cultures, particularly those associated with the Toltec civilization centered at Tula in the Valley of Mexico. The Great Ball Court at Chichen Itza, measuring 168 meters in length and featuring walls rising 12 meters above the playing surface, incorporated acoustic properties that enabled normal conversation at one end to be heard clearly at the opposite end while demonstrating construction techniques that combined Maya corbelled arch traditions with central Mexican talud tablero architectural elements. The Temple of Kukulkan, known locally as El Castillo, exemplified the sophisticated integration of astronomical knowledge with architectural design that characterized northern Maya achievements during this period. The pyramid's 4 staircases each contained 91 steps, which combined with a shared top platform created a total of 365 steps corresponding to the solar year, while the building's orientation enabled dramatic shadow effects during the spring and autumn equinoxes when the afternoon sun created the appearance of a serpent descending the northern staircase. The precision required for these astronomical alignments demanded sophisticated surveying techniques and mathematical calculations that demonstrated the continuation of Maya scientific traditions despite the political and social upheavals of the previous century. The internal organization of the Temple of Kukulkan revealed construction techniques that incorporated multiple building phases spanning several centuries, with earlier structures completely enclosed within later additions that preserved architectural elements while adapting them to changing ceremonial requirements. Archaeological investigations of the pyramid's interior have revealed an earlier temple containing a jade-encrusted jaguar throne and a Chak Mool sculpture, indicating that the building served continuous religious functions while undergoing periodic modifications that reflected evolving political and spiritual needs. The caracol, or observatory, at Chichen Itza demonstrated the sophisticated astronomical knowledge that northern Maya communities maintained and developed during the post-classic period. The circular tower's interior contained windows and openings precisely aligned with key positions of Venus, the Moon, and other celestial bodies at crucial points in their cycles, enabling astronomer priests to maintain accurate calendrical calculations and predict eclipses with remarkable precision. The building's unique architectural form, unprecedented in earlier Maya construction, may have reflected central Mexican influences while serving distinctly Maya astronomical and ceremonial functions. The Great Ball Court's sculptural program provided detailed insights into the ritual significance of the ball game during this period, with relief carvings depicting the decapitation of players and the emergence of plants from their flowing blood, symbolizing agricultural renewal through ritual sacrifice. The court's acoustic properties enabled spectators throughout the facility to hear the sounds of the solid rubber balls striking playing surfaces, while the architectural integration of the court with surrounding temple complexes emphasized the game's religious significance and its role in maintaining cosmic order through ritualized competition. The sacred cenote at Chichen Itza served as a major pilgrimage destination that attracted visitors from throughout Mesoamerica, who brought offerings of jade, gold, copal incense, textiles, and human sacrifices to petition the rain god Chark for agricultural prosperity and protection from natural disasters. Archaeological investigations of the cenote's depths have recovered thousands of artifacts representing diverse cultural traditions from across Mesoamerica, indicating that Chichen Itza's religious influence extended far beyond the Maya region and attracted pilgrims from central Mexico, the Gulf Coast, and other distant areas. The sacrificial practices associated with the sacred cenote included the ritual drowning of victims during periods of drought or other crises, with survivors who managed to remain alive until midday being rescued and questioned about messages they had received from the gods during their ordeal. These ceremonies required elaborate preparations, including fasting, purification rituals, and the selection of appropriate victims according to specific criteria related to age, physical condition, and spiritual qualifications that varied according to the nature of the crisis being addressed. Political organization at Chichen Itza differed significantly from the divine kingship systems that had characterized earlier Maya polities, with power apparently shared among multiple leaders representing different factions or ethnic groups within the community. The site's architecture includes several structures that may have served as meeting halls for governing councils, while the absence of elaborate royal tombs and dynastic monuments suggests that political authority was less centralized and hereditary than in classic period centers. The influence of central Mexican cultures at Chichen Itza extended beyond architectural styles to include religious concepts, artistic motifs, and possibly political institutions that reflected direct contact with Toltec and other central Mexican groups. The appearance of feathered serpent imagery, warrior orders associated with eagles and jaguars, and human sacrifice practices similar to those documented in central Mexico suggests either migration of central Mexican populations to Yucatan or intensive cultural exchange that transformed northern Maya civilization during the early post-classic period. Mayapan emerged as the dominant political center in northern Yucatan during the 13th century, establishing control over much of the peninsula through a confederation system that incorporated dozens of smaller communities into a hierarchical political network centered on the walled city that housed an estimated 15,000 inhabitants. The site's urban planning reflected lessons learned from earlier Maya cities, with residential areas, craft workshops, ceremonial complexes, and administrative buildings organized within a defensive wall system that protected the urban core while enabling controlled access for trade and ceremonial activities. The architectural traditions at Mayapan demonstrated both continuity with earlier northern Maya styles and adaptations to changing political and social conditions during the late post-classic period. The site's main pyramid, though smaller than the Temple of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza, incorporated similar astronomical alignments and architectural proportions while featuring construction techniques that emphasized efficiency and durability over elaborate decoration. The building's relatively simple exterior concealed sophisticated internal arrangements, including multiple chambers, hidden passages, and specialized areas for different types of ceremonial activities. Residential architecture at Mayapan revealed significant social stratification within the urban population, with elite compounds featuring stone masonry construction, multiple rooms arranged around interior courtyards, and elaborate decorative elements including carved stone facades and painted murals. Commoner residences employed simpler construction techniques, using perishable materials for walls and roofing, though even these structures incorporated stone foundations and platforms that elevated living areas above seasonal flooding while providing improved ventilation and security. The craft production systems at Mayapan achieved remarkable specialization and efficiency through the organization of workshops that produced standardized goods for both local consumption and long-distance trade. Ceramic production facilities created distinctive pottery styles that combined traditional Maya forms with new decorative techniques, while textile workshops produced cotton fabrics that were traded throughout Mesoamerica. Obsidian working continued at reduced levels compared to classic period production, with craftsmen adapting their techniques to work with smaller quantities of raw materials obtained through more limited trade networks. The Confederation system established by Mayapan incorporated multiple levels of political authority, with the central city exercising control over subordinate communities through a combination of military force, economic incentives, and religious authority. Local rulers maintained autonomy over internal affairs while acknowledging Mayapan's supremacy in matters of external relations, military campaigns, and major ceremonial activities. This political arrangement enabled more efficient resource mobilization and defense coordination, while preserving local traditions and identities that had been threatened by the centralized systems of earlier periods. Religious practices at Mayapan continued many traditional Maya ceremonies, while adapting to changing social and political conditions that affected the organization and funding of major ritual activities. The site's temples maintained the astronomical alignments and architectural symbolism that connected earthly ceremonies with cosmic cycles, while priestly schools preserved the mathematical and calendrical knowledge necessary for accurate prediction of eclipses, planetary positions, and seasonal changes. However, the scale and frequency of major ceremonies appears to have been reduced compared to classic period practices, reflecting both smaller populations and more limited economic resources available for religious activities. Highland Maya communities in Guatemala and Chiapas developed different adaptive strategies during the post-classic period, maintaining traditional agricultural and social systems while adapting to new political realities created by the collapse of lowland centers and changing trade relationships. The Quiché Maya established powerful kingdoms centered at sites like Cumarcaig that controlled extensive territories through military conquest and tributary relationships, while preserving traditional religious practices and maintaining the long count calendar system that had been abandoned in many lowland areas. The Popol Vuh, the sacred book of the Quiché Maya, preserved creation myths and historical traditions that provided continuity with pre-Columbian religious and cultural concepts, while adapting to changing political circumstances. The text's sophisticated literary structure and complex mythological content demonstrated the continuation of intellectual traditions that had flourished during the classic period, while its preservation in alphabetic script after Spanish contact revealed the adaptability of Maya cultural institutions to new technologies and social conditions. Highland Maya communities maintained traditional agricultural systems based on maize, beans, and squash cultivation, while developing new crops and farming techniques that increased productivity and enabled population growth during the post-classic period. The introduction of new plant varieties from other regions of Mesoamerica, combined with improved soil management techniques and expanded terracing systems, enabled highland communities to support larger populations while maintaining environmental sustainability. The persistence of traditional weaving techniques in highland communities preserved technological knowledge and artistic traditions that had developed over centuries of cultural evolution. Maya weavers continued to produce textiles of extraordinary complexity and beauty, using backstrap looms and traditional fibre preparation techniques, while adapting their designs and production methods to changing social conditions and market demands. The symbolic content of textile designs maintained connections to pre-Columbian religious and cosmological concepts, while incorporating new elements that reflected contemporary social and political realities. Coastal Maya communities developed maritime trade networks that connected Yucatan with distant regions including central Mexico, Honduras, and Panama, maintaining commercial relationships that had been disrupted by the collapse of inland political centres. These coastal traders employed large canoes capable of carrying substantial cargo loads across open water, navigating by stars and coastal landmarks, while maintaining detailed knowledge of seasonal weather patterns, ocean currents, and safe harbours along their trade routes. The technological innovations developed by coastal Maya communities included improved boat construction techniques that created more durable and seaworthy vessels, while navigation methods incorporated astronomical knowledge that enabled accurate positioning during long-distance voyages. The integration of maritime and overland trade routes created commercial networks that maintained cultural and economic connections across vast distances despite the political fragmentation that characterized the post-classic period. The maintenance of the long count calendar and hieroglyphic writing systems in some Maya communities represented remarkable cultural continuity despite the social and political upheavals that had transformed Maya civilization during the 9th and 10th centuries. Scribal schools in highland Guatemala and northern Yucatan continued to train specialists in the complex mathematical and astronomical knowledge required for accurate calendar keeping, while preserving the literary and historical traditions that connected contemporary communities with their pre-Columbian heritage. The Dresden Codex and other surviving Maya manuscripts demonstrated the sophisticated astronomical and mathematical knowledge that Maya intellectual traditions had maintained throughout the post-classic period. These texts contained eclipse tables, Venus calculations, and ritual calendars that enabled accurate prediction of celestial events across extended time periods, while preserving mythological and historical information that provided cultural continuity across centuries of social change. The final florescence of Maya civilization in northern Yucatan continued until the Spanish conquest disrupted indigenous political systems and imposed new religious and social institutions that transformed Maya culture while failing to completely eliminate traditional practices and beliefs. The resilience of Maya communities during this final pre-Columbian period demonstrated the adaptability and cultural strength that had enabled Maya civilization to survive and flourish across 2 millennia of environmental challenges, political upheavals, and social transformations. The legacy of Maya achievements in mathematics, astronomy, architecture, agriculture, and artistic expression provided foundations for cultural continuity that persisted beyond the Spanish conquest, influencing colonial and modern developments while preserving essential elements of Maya identity and knowledge systems. The sophisticated urban planning, water management technologies, and sustainable agricultural practices developed by Maya communities offered valuable insights for contemporary societies facing similar environmental and social challenges, while the intellectual achievements of Maya scholars contributed to humanity's understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and calendar systems. The remarkable trajectory of Maya civilization, from its humble origins in small agricultural villages to its development into one of the world's most sophisticated pre-industrial societies, demonstrated the extraordinary potential of human creativity and adaptability when supported by sustainable environmental practices and inclusive social institutions. The Maya achievement in creating complex urban societies without metal tools, wheeled vehicles, or large domestic animals while maintaining environmental sustainability across diverse ecological zones provided compelling evidence of alternative pathways to social complexity that differed fundamentally from Old World developmental patterns. The intellectual and artistic achievements of Maya civilization, including their independent development of writing, mathematics, and astronomical science, established their place among humanity's greatest cultural achievements while demonstrating the universal human capacity for scientific inquiry and artistic expression. Their sophisticated understanding of time, space, and natural processes created knowledge systems that rivaled contemporary developments in other world regions, while reflecting distinctly American approaches to understanding the cosmos and humanity's place within it. Thus concluded one of humanity's most remarkable civilizations, whose achievements in science, art, architecture, and social organization provided lasting contributions to human knowledge while demonstrating the extraordinary potential of indigenous American societies to create complex, sustainable, and intellectually sophisticated cultures that flourished for over 2 millennia before European contact transformed the trajectory of American historical development.